buenas a todos. ¿Cómo está toda la banda hoy? ¿Cómo están todos? Hola a todos los que están llegando. Hola 199 Gamer. Hola a todos. ¿Cómo están? ¿Qué se cuentan? ¿Cómo andan? Espero que estén todos nice, que estén teniendo un bonito domingo. Hoy pienso hacer algo chill porque inicié un poco tarde, así que... Y además, si soy honesto y quiero descansar un poco de los juegos, así que... Hoy vamos a hacer algo muy chill, muy tranquilo. Que vamos a seguir reaccionando a papá Yathzeee. ¿Qué les parece? Espero que esté todo bien. Es su crítico mamador, amante de los videojuegos y disociado, Germania63. Y estamos aquí para eso. Hoy vamos a hablar solo de Yathzeee. Ok. Contexto para los que tanto vienen por primera vez como las que ya vinieron aquí en el
199 Gamer.
Exactamente, tengo
¿Tienes
repo.
repo?
No, mentira, no tengo el repo. Estoy quebrado. No, pero serio, fuera de meme. No tengo el repo. Tendría que ocuparlo cuando pueda.
199 Gamer. Dice. XD instala lo que es gratis.
¿En Steam? No.
199 Gamer. Dice. Hasta mañana le quitan la promoción.
A mí me hace... yo lo busqué.
199
Yo lo busqué
Gamer.
anoche y me dice que solo tiene un
Dice.
35% de descuento.
Sí, te lo juro. 199 Gamer. Dice. Lo juro por mi papá.
Mi joven, estoy en la página de Argentina. Y sí, dice lo puedo jugar hasta 3 de noviembre gratis.
199 Gamer.
Ya.
Dice.
Lo voy a instalar, lo voy a instalar
tengo
mañana.
instalado.
Lo voy a instalar mañana o esta noche, ya veré. Pero igual va a ser solo gratis hasta mañana a la tarde. Wow.
199 Gamer. Dice. Instálalo, se quedará, mañana se va.
Ya, mañana ya esta tarde lo instalo. Esta tarde a la noche lo instalo. Pero por ahora vamos a estar de chill. Genial que lo estéis instalado. Hoy vamos a estar de chill, chicos. Ok, para los que me conocen acá en el canal de lo que es el contexto de aquí. El contexto de esto es simple. De paso voy a compartir
199
el stream
Gamer.
en Twitter.
Dice. Bueno, ok.
Voy a compartir de paso el stream en Twitter. De paso lo de siempre, chicos. El tema es así. Vamos a ver un crítico que admiro desde Añares, que es el crítico que me ha inspirado a ser un crítico freelance de videojuegos. Ok. Vamos a ver los videos de él. Tanto como dije, estuvimos viendo hasta ahora el 2007. Ahora estamos viendo los de 2011. El tema aquí es que solo vamos a ver los juegos que yo haya jugado.
199 Gamer. Dice. XD.
En fin, vamos a mirar solo de los juegos que yo haya jugado y que yo pueda decir que tiene razón o no tiene razón Yathzeee. Y de eso va a tratarse, al menos, calculo vamos a estar unas 2 horas y media aquí en el stream más o menos. Pero de eso va a tratar el stream de esta tarde. Analizar lo que dijo Yathzeee y tener en cuenta que ha envejecido bien, que ha envejecido mal y que lo pueden tomar como bueno o malo, más o menos. Así que primero
199
voy a
Gamer. Dice. Bro, pobre Flegway.
Ya se le va a pasar. Peor es que terminaran la rule. A ver, voy a compartir el stream de Twitch de aquí en Twitter mientras tanto, dame unos segundos. Padre Yathzeee, venga. Un GIF de Yathzeee.
199 Gamer. Dice. XD.
Un gifcito de papá Yathzeee. A ver cuál está bonito. Este está bonito. Sí, este está bonito. Ok, vamos a elegir este de papá Yathzeee.
199 Gamer. Dice. ¿Qué utilizas para grabar el directo?
OBS, como todo
199
persona.
Gamer. Dice. OBS otra.
No, OBS. Solo OBS. Solo y genuinamente puro OBS.
199 Gamer. Dice. Me voy, chao.
Chao, cuídate. Gracias por venir, aunque sea un ratito. Aprecio eso, aunque sea unos segundos. Ok, vamos a ver. Ya, ok. Vamos a cerrar Discord. Voy a mirar a ver si no me mandaron un mensaje o algo del otro grupo. Se pasan de mamones. Se pasan de mamones. En fin. ¿Ya está todo? Ok, repito. Entonces va a ser eso. Vamos a mirar los videos Yathzeee de todos los juegos. Voy a decir lo que yo opino de esos juegos. De cómo es la visión diferente que se tenía de esos juegos. Tanto desde 2010 hasta 2025, antes que tuvieran su fama. Esto es, repito, un análisis y crítica personal. No tiene que ver nada con lo que ustedes crean o lo que ustedes quieran creer de un juego. Ustedes quieren disfrutar del juego, disfrútenlo. Sean felices. Pero yo soy un crítico mamón. Tengo que hacer mi trabajo de crítico mamón. De analizar el juego, ver los puntos positivos o los puntos negativos del juego. Y qué es lo que tiene el juego de todo lo que fue la experiencia para el jugador, tanto sea positiva o negativa, en ese pasado que se estaba experimentando. Ok, ya, para quedar claro y que no haya algún bardellillo y ya. Ok, vamos a ver en qué quedamos la última vez con... Ah, estábamos en 2010. Ah, soy pendejo, estaba mintiendo, era 2010 donde quedamos, no 2000... en 2011. Chiste pendejo entonces. Así que... Sí, es de Mafia. Ok, el siguiente supuestamente es de Mafia. Vamos a ver.
My forehead will start the game licking mildew off his landlady's crystallized vagina to make rent and will be lured into
Dios mío, empezamos de la forma más perfecta como puede ser con Yathzeee.
organized crime by the money, the clothes, the pretty cars, the fast whores, etc. But after a brief heyday will be ordered to kill a friend, or a friend will be ordered to kill them, and they will realize that crime does not pay, except for all the money and the clothes and the pretty cars and the fast whores, etc. I have never seen a mafia story where a bloke joins the mafia and then everything is lovely forever. Why does society insist on demonizing organized crime? We all agree prohibition was a stupid law, right? So why is it socially acceptable to crave a nice cup of tea in the morning or a cigarette after a nobbing, but the moment I try to pound half a kilo of smack into my eyeballs, everyone thinks there's something wrong with me? Mafia 2 is a game about the mafia. They were going to call it Quest for the Sausage Fountain, but you know how people are, you have to spell everything out. Following the adventures of a European immigrant named Vito Scaletti, who arrives in the big city and enters
Entiendo el chiste por el tema de que los supuestamente son inmigrantes.
into various criminal pursuits with his fat best friend Joe something or other. Events are largely unconnected to Mafia 1, although there is one memorable crossover scene showing that Vito had an extremely brief appearance in the previous game, which I thought was a nice little touch. I even went back and looked at the scene again in Mafia 1, and the characters kind of looked like how they do in Mafia 2, except that they'd all been hit in the face with a shovel a few times because this was PS2 era graphics. Anyway, Vito and Joe join a Mafia family, get a whole bunch of pretty cars and fast whores, and then everything is lovely forever. Or that could just have been the point when the PCP kicked in. Those attentive motherfuckers among you may have grasped from the previous paragraph that somewhere down the line from this speeding monologue a comparison to Grand Theft Auto 4 lies lashed and shrieking to the railroad tracks, but the more I played Mafia 2, the less apt this comparison became. For starters, GTA 4 actually let you do shit. Mafia 2 is technically a sandbox in the same way that the occupant of a...
Ok, recuerden esto. Moderners, lo siento, pero ya saben que esto va a ser pausa y eso durante casi 2 horas y media. Recuerden que para la época de 2010 todo el mundo quería hacer un GTA y no es nada nuevo, ya ha pasado desde época GTA 3, GTA Vice City, GTA San Andreas. No es sorpresa para muchos que quisieran hacer algo parecido al GTA 4, pero con Mafia. El primer Mafia tuvo bastante éxito, lo recomiendo bastante, incluso está gratis o al menos para mí estuvo gratis en Steam, o lo tengo aquí guardado en mi cuenta. Y la verdad lo recomiendo bastante. Lo que sí no recuerdo mucho de Mafia 2 es el tema de manejo. Puede ser que el manejo era muy culero en algunos niveles, más en lo que eran los niveles de los que eran niveles de escape y eso, porque recuerdo por ejemplo que en GTA 4 sí, el manejo era un poco más tosco, pero no te costaba tanto acostumbrarte. En Mafia 2 te cuesta un poco más. Entonces ya es cosa de costumbre. Como dije, es difícil como en GTA 5 tratar de manejar cuando la policía te tirotea o cuando la policía te tirotea y tratas de leer los subtítulos de que el diablo se está pasando.
high-security prison van driving through Blackpool is technically a holidaymaker. I'm not sure why Mafia 2 and indeed Mafia 1 felt they needed to be open world, because they're both heavily story-based linear sequences of missions, and largely the only activity available between missions is schlepping to the next one through the same dull scenery.
Bueno, irónicamente ese es el mismo pecado que tiene Mafia 1 también. Pues Mafia 1 sí, pues irte libremente, pero si te saltas la historia, solo si te saltas la historia, porque si sigues la historia es todo lineal, no tienes mucho que explorar, muy pocos niveles tienes para recoger coleccionables o secretos, como por ejemplo ahí también Mafia 2 que tiene el tema de los pósters o el tema de ciertos trajes y eso. Creo que casi la mitad del juego te la gastaré el dinero solo en armas y nada más, al menos tengas el virus cerebral, los gusanillos de cerebro que tengo yo llamado complexionismo, y quieras ir al 100% de todo, por lo cual te recomiendo, haz un primer playthrough y si sabes que no lo conseguiste todo, fíjate en una guía. Pues son un montón de coleccionables, quisiera decir que es meme, pero no lo es.
Have suggested to me that this is to build an atmosphere of realism and highlight that life in organised crime was really just a sobering routine day job, to which I would say, piss off, this is a game. Games are fun. I want to knob prostitutes while singing songs from Bugsy Malone, and say forget about it without irony. You know, after a while, day job is exactly the right word for it. Virtually every chapter starts with Vito waking up in the morning and driving to work. Work involves being led around by the nose following a linear sequence of instructions and then doing a bit of cover-based combat if you're very good. And the shooting eventually becomes just as routine as an office job where all you do is file bullets under faces all day. Then at the end of your shift, the game instructs you to drive straight home with nothing to do en route but collect Playboy centerfolds that the adult equivalent of the Easter Bunny has left lying around before having a quick sandwich and a wank before bed. Some people have said this should be judged as an interactive drama rather than a game, but this only works if the drama repeatedly switches between two different theatres that are 5 minutes drive from each other. It feels unnecessarily padded.
Yo lo siento más como que quisieron hacer como El Padrino, pero haciéndolo el doble melodramático de lo que era El Padrino 1. ¿A qué me refiero? Como dice Yathzeee, sí, eres un mafioso común, te vas manejando entre el mundo, vas incluso haciendo un trabajito por aquí, trabajito por allá, aunque depende de ciertas decisiones te terminas más arreglando los tiros o escapando de la policía de diferentes maneras. Pero lo que sí es cierto es el tema de que la historia se va poniendo supuestamente casi mejor. No digo que es mentira, obviamente la historia de Mafia 2 es defendible, muy defendible. Pero lo que yo pienso es de que también tiene tanto de ese sentimentalismo, por decirlo así. Solo por ponerlo en una parte, algo que es muy estilo Padrino o de cualquier película de mafia. Spoiler alert, de paso de lo que no jugaron Mafia 2, les daré 5 segundos de vida. Si no aprovechan los 5 segundos de vida para mutearme o saltar el stream o el video, se joden. No digan que yo no aviso. Hay dos partes que me hacen pensar de eso. El número uno es cuando tienes que ir a enfrentarte al abusivo del novio de tu hermana, porque tu hermana vuelve golpeada y descubres, obviamente como eres un mende que se maneja todo eso, que el bastardo que tiene de marido la vive golpeando y abusando. Obviamente ella trata de justificarse, pero tú sabes como buena persona que eso no se resuelve. Así que ¿cómo es la mejor manera de resolver la violencia? Pues con más violencia, cortándoles los dedos al bastardo, incluso yendo a golpearlo. Bueno, no recuerdo de cortar los dedos, pero sí lo de cagarlo bien a papeadas, física y mentalmente. Por lo cual incluso la hermana después ya no quiero volver a hablar contigo, porque aun cuando hiciste esa buena acción, te ha visto como un monstruo sin corazón, el verdadero tú que tú estás volviendo. Y el número 2, que eso ya es algo que la historia más o menos lo contaba, pero no sé si sentirlo como algo trágico o algo acelerado de la historia en sí. Parte para analizar cuando algún día toque el Mafia 2 aquí en este canal, si es que la Skillizos no está tan potente. Cuando recibes la carta y que te enteras que tu hermana, creo que era por tu hermana, o no recuerdo cómo era bien la historia, decidieron no pagar lo de tratamiento de tu madre o algo así, y tu madre termina muriendo. Esos dos golpes son muy melodramáticos, por decirlo así, pero es como, no sé si decirlo de una forma muy acelerada, porque de hacerlo en estilo El Padrino, así de golpe. Es algo que hasta ahora no me lo he puesto a pensar de eso, pero es algo que se tendría que analizar. Digo, depende también que lo analice y eso, porque también como dije, Mafia 2 también tiene algunas de las historias profundas de lo que es el mundo de la mafia y el tema sobre ya saben, las clásicas películas de mafiosos sobre el tema de las traiciones, la lealtad, lo último que se hace por un compañero, por la familia, es los negocios y todas esas cosas. Es algo que nunca me puse a analizar o a pensar en ello. Tal vez en los futuros mafias, si vamos a hacer un mes de mafia en este canal o algo, ya lo veré. Ya lo veré, lo tendré en mente, ya les diré.
Give me some credit. You don't have to make me drive the guy home every bloody night. I'm not going to assume he's going to drop where he stands and spend the night snoring away next to the shallow grave he just filled in. Goodfellas didn't feel it necessary to show us Joe Pesci flossing the babies out of his teeth every morning. Now, while the police in GTA 4 are apparently trained in Baghdad and won't turn on the siren for anything less than an IED detonating under their grandmother's rocking chair, Mafia 2's cops actually come after you for driving over the speed limit and running red lights, which I didn't mind because the odd high-speed chase did a lot to liven up Vito's morning commute. You see, the reason why I don't buy the interactive drama thing is that my favourite experiences in the game came when it went off script, like when I didn't have enough money for the mission and took it upon myself to rob some fancy clothing stores, entering exciting standoffs with police before nicking one of the suits on sale and instantly losing my wanted level because the cops all have paving stones for brains, or the one bit where I had to improvise my way across the city at night.
Hay un video que recuerdo que era un meme. Recuerdo que era un meme. Ya no sé si sigue ese meme. Literalmente un men tenía la policía más alta de nivel. Solo en toda una tienda. No sé cómo hizo, no recuerdo si era posible o no. Compró una camisa y la policía se fue caminando como si nada. Literalmente dice que a la gente estaba por ahí caminando, creo que asustado, algo de eso le valió madres. Porque el men hizo el truco de CJ, solo dijo: gorra nueva, pintura de cabra nueva. Hey, soy Cosme fulanito. Es como de vete al demonio. Ese es un video que tendría que buscarlo. Siempre me ha costado risa de ese video estúpido, pero tiene una lógica algo parecida a la de los GTA, por decirlo de una forma.
With a wanted level, no money, no car, and dressed only in a vest and Thundercats boxer shorts. When the game actually embraces its sandbox nature, it becomes halfway exhilarating, but then it lassos you back into line with more linear cover-based combat missions before you can have more than the regulation amount of fun. As for the story it's so proud of, I'm underwhelmed. Vito isn't exactly Jean Valjean. He's just a dark-haired white guy in a game that seems to be populated exclusively by them. The only way you can tell him apart is that he's the only one being followed around by a film crew in a retro 50s soundtrack. All he ever does is go along with things, like whatever the Sicilian word for bitch is, without the slightest flicker of emotion disturbing his pretty boy good looks. In the film, he'd be played by Keanu Reeves, or a big balsa wood cutout with greasy hair. I wouldn't say Mafia 2 is a bad game, I'm just not sure it knows what it wants to do, and the ending's a disappointment. Without wishing to spoil, it's like if the Shawshank Redemption
Allí estoy en desacuerdo, allí estoy muy en desacuerdo. Bueno, en parte desacuerdo y en parte no. Porque es cierto, el final es un final fuerte para los fans de Mafia, no lo voy a negar. Pero si lo pones como una de las películas cliché, por decirlo así, del momento, pues es cierto. El final es un final cliché. No digo que sea malo, ojo, cuiden mis palabras. No es malo el final. Pero es un final cliché que sí deja un gusto intermedio o un gusto de... esta ya la he visto, si has visto muchas películas de mafia o series de mafia de ese estilo. De el hombre que tuvo que sacrificar lo último o algo más, o incluso su vida, póngalo en cualquiera de esos. Bueno, pueden poner el mismo Mafia 1, el Mafia 1 tiene ese mismo final, por decirlo así. El último sacrificio antes de dejar la vida o dejar la familia y todo para volver a una vida con la mafia o con la familia en sí. Es un final demasiado cliché que ha pasado muchas veces en Padrinos, en Los Sopranos, en todo tipo de películas o series de mafia que se le pueda ocurrir en la mente. Así que no juzgaría en parte allí a Yathzeee por el tema de que para él el final de Mafia se hubiese sentido otro de esos final cliché de películas mafiosas. Aunque sí voy a decir que estoy en desacuerdo que diga que es decepcionante. Porque si has conectado con los personajes, aún con el idiota de turno, que es el amigo del prota, que no me estoy acordando el nombre porque ya estoy boober y disociado, te encariñas bastante con el personaje. Lo único que nunca he hecho, porque esto salió en 2015, 2016, este DLC creo, fue el DLC de Joe Vedetta, que ahí no sé por qué lo hicieron más shooter. ¿Por qué me refiero a más shooter? Lo que recuerdo de ese trailer, no he visto el gameplay, pero he visto pocas veces, es literalmente solo vas a una casa, tiroteas, ya. Vas a una casa, tiroteas, ya. No sé si es porque quisieron hacer como un DLC más al estilo tiroteo por el tema de lo lineal o querer agregar más acción a un juego sobre la mafia. Vete a saber.
Did while Tim Robbins was still covered in poo in a pipe. After reaching the crime does not pay phase of the standard Mafia storyline, the game just sort of cuts out halfway through resolving everything. I'm not about to claim that I can get a complete handle on a game just by reading the box blurb, although I wish I could, because it'd free up a lot of my time and my bathroom isn't going to clean itself, but after 3 whole misspent years of pausing for breath between takes, I am starting to recognise a few recurring warning signs. My suspicion that Metroid Other M might gargle go now.
De Metroid M he escuchado los rumores. He escuchado los videos. Y es irónico porque voy a decir esto otra vez. Siempre lo voy a decir como fan de Doom, como crítico de videojuegos y como jugador. Me causa un montón de gracia, me causa mucho jijeo. La gente que dice, oye, es que Metroid y Doom no tienen historias, no tienes que concentrarte en la historia, solo matar demonios, ¿por qué tendría que concentrarme en eso? Luego tienes juegos que generan un escándalo, como pasó con Metroid ODM o lo de Dark Age, porque supuestamente la historia está allí, solo que nosotros nunca la vimos o nunca nos interesamos en ello. Que es lo que también me causa risa lo del video de Kevo. Si no vieron el video de Kevo, que yo hablo mucho de ese men también, es cuando dijo de que de Doom Dark Age no es un mal juego. Y en parte tiene razón, pero también lo de la excusa de que ya el Doom de Eternal ya tenía los errores de Doom 16 también, eso es cierto. Yo lo viví diciendo hace mucho. Por una de las razones me caga Samuel Hayden. Por una de las razones, a veces digo que el DLC es una de las fumadas más sin sentido cuando sacaron la parte 2. Porque la parte 1 puede ser un buen final. Te enfrentas al tipo, tratas de descubrir quién es el Señor Oscuro y eso. Pero cuando después dice, es que el Señor Oscuro estuvo tanto yo. Y además para tener que hacer la paz para matar a todos los demonios y eso tienes que matar al mismo Señor Oscuro, haciendo que todo lo que hiciste en los otros y todo eso valía pito, es como de que vale madres. Y ni siquiera contemos lo de la energía Alien, porque lo de la energía Alien es un hueco argumental tan estúpido, es tan estúpido el hueco argumental que tiene la energía Alien, que no tiene sentido ni en 2016 ni en Eternal. Es solo la excusa de decir, sí, el experimento que hicimos con Doom 3. Bueno, algo parecido pasó con Doom 2016 y esta vez la cagamos peor, todo por culpa de Olivia Pierce. Que no te jode. Es por eso siempre me causa risa cuando uno dice, es que nunca dimos idea de la historia. Pero solo cuando el juego quiere empezar a dar historia o algo al coso. Obviamente de forma errónea. Porque eso es lo que pasó también con Metroid ODM. Quisiera darle una historia casi igual a lo que pasó con los Metroid Prime, incluso con los juegos de GBA. Pero aquí hay un tema y esto es lo que me causa gracia, y lo dijo un amigo que es dibujante en No Safe for Work, pero es muy fan a muerte de Metroid. ¿Cómo se lo tomaron los fans de Metroid al ver una Samus diferente a una Samus que era solamente pelear y ya? Y obviamente él mismo lo dijo, culero, demasiado culero. Y no lo culpo porque incluso Johnny, mi otro youtuber favorito, Calmi Johnny, dijo todos los errores y cosas sin sentido que tiene el mismo Metroid ODM. Incluso en tema del lore, como por ejemplo que la misma Samus, después de 2000 batallas, por primera vez se esté cagando por querer enfrentarse a Riley. Después de 2000 veces que se han peleado, incluso había peleado con el mismo robot Riley. Es algo que a muchos fans le han putado. Hasta ahora no me sorprende que muchos le haya caído al culo. Por eso puedo decir que conozco ya la historia de Metroid ODM y es una buena excusa de lo que he hablado mucho para decir que ya no veré el video. Bueno, además que no pude jugarlo porque es exclusivo de Wii y... Créanme, no quieren saber el dolor de cabeza que es configurar 4 horas un juego de Wii. Quise decir que es meme, pero es un asco configurar para un juego de Wii en PC, créanme, no es ni remotamente gracioso. No es ni remotamente gracioso, ni siquiera por un píxel. Y ahora se ha congelado el video, genial, me lleva la chingada. Ok, ahora qué pasó, ahora no está cargando. Ya sé por qué. El asqueroso límite de tiempo ese de... no, ahí está.
for all the good it did. Oh yeah, slightly and it's cunningly because the game resolved everyone shadows everything original like the D-pad for constantly switch nearing. Yeah, just play Metroid Prime again.
El episodio especial de Zero Punctuation es un anuncio de servicio público traído por el ESA.
Relationship with mainstream media than serial killers. Leaving aside the fact that in the eyes of many half of them spurt blood like a malfunctioning sprinkler lodged in the throat of a haemophiliac, it's easy for us veteran nerds stuffed full of muscle memory to forget that to a total newcomer, the video game controller might as well be the cockpit of a jumbo jet. To the layman, games are frightening, and both media outlets and politicians have a tendency to exploit these fears to gain points with Joe Dumbface, especially in election years like, oh, say for example this one, and it seems like some old git is calling for game regulation every 10 minutes, but what can we do? Well, they are old gits, so we could conceivably just wait for them all to die, but in the meantime we have the Video Game Voters Network. The VGVN is an organisation that lets American gamers get together and let their opinions be heard by legislators. It's true that there are people who see...
Exacto, recuerden lo mismo que se hace todos los finales de noviembre o mitad de noviembre, que irónicamente justo ahora estamos empezando, ya que estamos en noviembre, el tema de los GOTY. Pues algo así también. Neta, estoy curioso de ver cómo va a ser el tema de nominaciones y eso. Obviamente mis votaciones lo voy a mostrar en este stream como lo hago cada año. Y lo voy a mostrar a mis amigos y a mi server. Así que vamos a ver qué pasa. Supuestamente siempre es entre casi inicios o mitad de noviembre, aunque esta vez anunciaron que era en mitad de noviembre.
Games is a convenient target, that there are many of them among politicians, and it may be true that one day such people will be remembered alongside those who tried to outlaw movies and novels and theatre and dancing, and those people who said the steam train would cause women to spontaneously die of shock in its wake like rows of screaming dominoes. But until that day, it's up to us to show non-gamers that just because games aren't boring doesn't mean they're different to books, and just because games aren't 2 hours long and written by overpaid chimpanzees doesn't mean they're different to films. They all fall under the constitutional right to free speech. If someone who wants to legislate the censorship of art and culture gets in this November, then the next thing you know, you're picking jackboots out of your teeth. Video games are the cutting edge of a whole new wave of creativity, interactive storytelling, a development as artistically significant as the moment Picasso realised which end of a brush was which, and he couldn't even draw a proper face. The VGVN is important because games are too important to be left in the hands of the anti-fun brigade, and an armed uprising would only prove their bloody points. November will come sooner than you think, so now is the time to get off your asses, go to videogamevoters.org and sign up to do your bit.
Sí,
this might sound a bit
una propaganda solo para decir voten sus juegos favoritos, no sean críticos y algo así, al menos eso entendí.
Weird, but hurdy-gurdy boggly boo. This also might sound a bit weird, but the thing that bothered me most about Halo Reach was that no one ever wore seatbelts. It started early on when I was wondering why these standard video game aircraft have to keep the side doors wide open all the time when you think a military vehicle should be designed to protect its occupants from enemy fire, when someone perched themselves loosely along the side and the thing took off before he could strap himself in, the camera presumably cutting away moments before the guy got hurled off and landed in somebody's hedge. And after that I couldn't stop noticing it. There were several moments when people were standing or sitting on the end of the open ramp at the back of a large transporter as it took off, staring meaningfully at the retreating scenery and apparently having nailed their feet to the floor. This is the kind of bullshit that really takes me out of the story. I could barely enjoy the horrible plot, cliched characters and repetitive gameplay. So rend your Master Chief t-shirt and sob wetly into your limited edition Cortana wank rags, Halo fans, because Halo Reach is the last Halo game. You'll just have to console yourself with
Recuerden eso, Halo Reach, el último juego de Halo. Eso lo va a golpear demasiado fuerte y muy duro a Yathzeee en futuros años.
Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo Wars, the toys, the comics, the expanded universe novels, the colouring book and the his and hers matching beach towels. Most of which you will apparently need to have gone through to understand what the fuck's going on in this game. I do respect Bungie for so firmly drawing a line under their popular series, which sits just above refuse a second helping of pancakes on the list of things George Lucas will never do. But anyone who thinks this is the last we'll see of Halo clearly has no ambitions of joining the Microsoft Game Division's strategic planning department. I'm sure they'll be stashing this particular elderly corpse in the crawl space and cashing its pension checks long after Bungie have toddled off to make their long-awaited sequel to Oni. So Halo...
Bueno, es gracioso sabiendo lo que ha pasado hasta ahora con Halo Infinite y ahora con lo que está por pasar con el nuevo Halo Evolve Remastered que está por salir, así que Yathzeee, como siempre, prediciendo el futuro. No sé cómo lo hace, se está por volver el nuevo Simpson.
Halo Reach is a prequel installment depicting the beginning of the Human Covenant War, and as such should be virtually impossible to spoil, because whenever Reach gets brought up in the other games and media and everything, it's referred to as a place where a whole lot of shit got fucked up.
Bueno, eso es cierto. Me imagino, eso es algo que me causaría gracia. Y es más... la otra vez estaba en stream Sargento 343, no soy amigo de él, pero he visto pocos de los streams de él. Me gustaría preguntarle cómo se ha sentido o cómo se sintieron en ese inicio al ver un teaser o un trailer de Halo Reach y decir, o sea que nos van a mostrar cuando todo antes se fue al carajo, o al menos cómo fue la reacción. Me gustaría buscar cómo fue la reacción de la gente cuando vieron Halo Reach, o las teorías en internet que hubo cuando se estaba anunciando Halo Reach. Hay muchas cosas en internet y eso que quiero buscar, pero no sé cómo buscarlo, cómo ir más al fondo del lugar oscuro de los videojuegos y eso, que tengo que descubrir alguna forma de cómo hacerlo, aun cuando tomen tiempo.
Everyone in this prequel seems to be fully aware of their ultimately doomed status too. No one's particularly surprised when the Covenant do show up, with incidentally all human characters immediately being totally familiar with the operation of Covenant weapons and vehicles. You'd almost think they'd just built this game off the engine of a previous one or something. And the story is focused on a small commando unit whose members spend the entire game having a prolonged who can have the noblest death competition. Oh come on, this isn't a spoiler. They wouldn't characterise this many NPCs if they weren't going to pick them off like after 8 minutes. The very first image in the game is a brief flash forward depicting your helmet lying discarded in the dust of battle-scarred terrain. What the fuck do you think happens in the end? Your character thrillingly and climactically gets a little bit hot. Halo and I haven't always...
Eso sí sería muy hijo de puta. Eso sería muy hijo de puta. Pero, como él lo dijo... Yo no estoy golpeando por ahí. A ver, aguanten un minuto. No, eran los del vecino. Creo que están haciendo reparaciones o algo. Por eso dije, ¿qué diablos es el ruido? No, te pasa, espera, entonces cerrar las puertas de atrás que quedó abierta. Ya. Como decía, esa es una cosa que quiero imaginarme porque también es algo gracioso. Dices, este casco de un héroe. Obviamente es un héroe después que te pasa la historia, pero cuando inicias es como dice Yathzeee, oh, un casco. ¿Quién de todos los bastardos que nos vamos a morir va a ser ese casco?
seen eye to visor, me having in the past called it a boring, repetitive shooter with an impenetrable plot and a fanbase consisting of cunts who have survived so many cunt filtration attempts that they have evolved to a state of hypothetical meta-cunts. But I feel suddenly inclined to be charitable towards Halo Reach because it's the first shooter I've played in quite a long time that doesn't have cover-based combat and iron sight aiming, the two faces of the giant scrotum monster that has settled on mainstream gaming like a deflated hot air balloon. So I was ready to meet Halo Reach halfway, but you had to give a little for this relationship to work, Halo. For a game that styled itself Combat Evolved, you seem to have done very little of the second word since 2001. Same weapons, same enemies, same beach level, same grass level, same alien spaceship level, same horrible habit of suddenly insta-killing you every now and again, like when you have to reload and a bloke with an energy sword runs up and hacks off your courageously outward thrust nipples, or when a fireball from an artillery unit drops out of the sky and flattens you because you had popped into cover for 3/4 of a second to have it.
Bueno, recuerdan lo que siempre digo, mis problemas de los shooters con el tema de que no siempre los shooters revolucionan las cosas. Lo que está diciendo Yathzeee irónicamente es lo que yo mismo puedo nombrar de 30 shooters como Call of Duty, como por ejemplo Doom, como por ejemplo, bueno, Doom al menos ha revolucionado en cada tiempo, como lo hizo con 2016 Eternal, como lo pasó también con Call of Duty, como lo ha pasado con Battlefield, con una cantidad de shooters que nombraría de la época de 2010-2011, que fue la época de shooters. No muchos revolucionaban eso y no muchos sacaban algo nuevo. Muy pocos eran los que evolucionaban, pero si tengo que resumir los shooters en palabras de Yathzeee,
Combat Evolved, you seem to have done very little of the second word since 2001. Same weapons, same enemies, same beach level, same grass level, same alien spaceship level, same horrible habit of suddenly insta-killing you every now and again, like when you have to reload and a bloke with an energy sword runs up and hacks off your courageously outward thrust nipples, or when a fireball from an artillery unit drops out of the sky and flattens you because you had popped into cover for 3/4 of a second to have a little cry. Having said that, there is some variety, but it comes and goes faster than an erection at a Bangkok strip joint. I'd heard there was some spaceship combat, which I was looking forward to, because the endangered genre of spaceship combat is my personal equivalent of the giant panda, but it consists of one measly token dog.
El de la nave sí es interesante. En eso sí estoy un poco de desacuerdo. Sí, los controles son iguales como todo juego de nave. Pero hay algo en las peleas de nave de Halo Reach que le da ese toque chido, ese tipo de pelea badass, por decirlo así. No sabía cómo describirlo, eso sí, la misión es un dolor de huevo. No vayan a jugar esa misión en dificultad leyenda. Dios mío, la cantidad de horas que pasé en esa misión no es normal. No es putamente normal.
fight with a single enemy fleet, and then it's back on the ground in boring old gravity again. Well, that's not strictly true. There's also a bit later on where you can hop around in a jetpack, but again, it's over before your brain can get as far as the second O in ooh, this is fun. The jetpack is part of a new system where you can swap out the sprint function in your armor for other abilities, usually a shield that means you can't move or attack while it's on, so it's about as much use as a cheeseburger at a fashion model convention. And if you've removed your sprint function, that just makes you doubly fucked when the energy sword nipple fiend is on the prowl. But isn't there multiplayer as well? Shut up, mouth shut now. We've been over this. A full price game has to stand up on single player because there are always factors in the way of multiplayer the game can't help. Like its servers becoming tumbleweed haunted ghost towns 3 months down the line, or the aforementioned meta cunts doing what they do best at full volume in my ear. But the thing is, Halo Reach sort of does stand up on its single player. It's not within spunking distance of classic territory, but there's nothing particularly offensive about it, and at least makes an effort. I was actually somewhat impressed by the game's ending, just because it's a neat little example of gameplay and story mixing. You hold out as long as you can against the Horde, but it's abundantly clear that it's only a matter of time before you have to take home the coveted first prize in the Who Can Have the Noblest Death competition. I guess whether Halo Reach is worth the price depends wholly on your...
Ok, esa es muy culera, esa de competición de muerte sabiendo la cantidad de personajes que mueren. Quisiera decir que no es meme, pero es graciosamente cierto. La cantidad de personajes que mueren en Halo Reach. Mi regla para cuando jueguen Halo Reach, aunque sea su primera vez, no se encariñen con nadie. No lo digo meme, no se encariñen con nadie. Esa persona viste en 2 segundos, muerto. Quisiera decir que es spoiler, pero mismo Yathzeee ya lo dijo al principio, no es spoiler, el mismo juego lo dice.
Your level of disposable income. For example, if you have willingly parted with money for PlayStation Move, then feel free to go nuts, because apparently you already have done. Once upon a time, there was a game called Dead Rising that coined the phrase, when there's no more room in hell, the NPCs will walk into walls a whole bunch. It came out on the Xbox 360 while the console was still young and innocent, and the word Kinect would still have made red wavy lines appear in Microsoft Word, and featured a unique approach to sandbox gameplay set in a zombie holocaust. And while it's true the difficulty curve was so steep it had a fucking overhang that only curved harder during the countless escort missions, hampered by survivor AI that had been curb-stomped a few times under the hobnail boots of the stupid fairy, it was at least a pretty original game. But now there's a sequel, so much for that. The only real difference is that instead of leveling up by taking funny pictures of zombies for your scrapbook, now you do it by sellotaping fire axes to sledgehammers and pounding them into gravy. Actually, that's a pretty good difference. So after everyone just sort of got over the whole zombie apocalypse thing in the first game, an effort is made to just live and let unlive with the zombies, or rather live and let splatter all over pay-per-view TV with chainsaw motorbikes. But there's another gosh darned outbreak, and our hero Chuck Green is trapped in a glitzy Vegas-style hellhole with a disproportionately large number of psychotic murderers with ridiculous amounts of health. The story is naturally retarded. This is Capcom we're talking about. Capcom make game stories the same.
Antes de decir algo, porque no quiero decir algo polémico, recuerdo la historia que era algo simple, eso es cierto. O sea, eres un corredor mata zombies, pero que después se produce otra infección en ese lugar y tienes que obviamente ir otra vez a rescatar gente, tratar de tener zombies para tu hija, a la vez de descubrir qué demonios está pasando con allí y todo eso. No lo diría que es un desastre, ojo, porque ya todos saben la historia de Racing 2 es buena, pero sí tengo que decir que es algo parecido a un pequeñísimo copy-paste del de Racing 1. O sea, descontando la nueva mecánica de tienes que estar atento a tu hija y eso, es literalmente calcula tu tiempo, mata zombies, vea por descubrir la conspiración número 2550 de la creación de los zombies, o qué armas usarán, o qué para que los zombies puedan ser controlados, o cómo puedan ser usados como unas armas biológicas. Deténlos. Fin.
Same way tumble dryers make potato salad. The main plot involves a protest group who are opposed to cruelty to zombies because, you know, give a shambling corpse a friendly hug and it might briefly remember being human after he's had a few mouthfuls of your face. But the plot makes out they're supposed to be in the right. Chuck is even established to have sympathies with them right before he runs outside in a lady's crimpling dress and uses a battle axe to separate the top halves from the bottom halves over the entire cast of 28 days later. Let me make this clear now. I actually quite like Dead Rising 2. It just doesn't seem to like me very much. I'm not sure why, when I'm obviously such a cuddly, inoffensive soul. Just as before, you have a certain amount of time to kill before rescue with timed events occurring at fixed points, and I had to restart the game at one point because the time limit on a critical boss encounter ran out while I was halfway through the fucking thing. How the hell did the boss make their escape while I was watching them wind my lower intestines around a candy floss machine, Dead Rising 2? The cynic...
Eso es algo jodido. Más si quieres hacer el 100%. Nunca hagan el 100% de Dead Rising 2. Yo no pude. Tras 2 playthroughs que me costaron unos meses, yo no pude hacer el 100%. No pude. Van calculando el tiempo y todo eso. No putas pude. No pude en nada. Y Dios santo, no lo recomienda a nadie. Son muy pocos, creo, lo que puedo hacer 100% rescatar a todo el mundo y matar a todos los psicópatas en el de Racing 2. Y sería un milagro que alguien lo haya logrado en su primer playthrough. Sería un milagro de la naturaleza humana que una persona lo haya logrado solo en un playthrough, lo cual lo dudo que exista.
Cynic in me, sorry, that should have read, the cynic that is me, wants to say that the ability to restart the game at any point retaining your character level and upgrades is a feature added so they wouldn't have to balance the game properly, as there are a lot of encounters and boss fights that on the first playthrough are about as fair as a man with nitroglycerin buttock injections entering an ass-kicking contest. It was only halfway through my second attempt that I finally learned the fucking dodge roll. That would have been nice about 3 hours ago when a giant pink chainsaw was sliding bloodily in and out of my newly created chest vagina. There's a fine line between extending a game's last ability and just wasting my fucking time. Importantly, the NPCs are significantly less retarded and will now efficiently follow you no matter how little attention you give them, sort of like most of my ex-girlfriends. They're much better at navigating crowds of zombies too, so the actual escorts are trivial skips through the tulips, but from a certain point onwards a surprising number of survivors refuse to follow you until you pay them money. Oh, okay, I'll just leave you inside that zombie's mouth for an hour or two while I go find an ATM. Sorry, Survivor, I forgot. Did you say you wanted money or to be punched in the face with flaming boxing gloves? Because those I've got. It's not too much of a problem, because as long as you caveman club every ATM you pass, you'll never be hurting for money, but it does feel a bit hypocritical when one of the primary subsets of non-zombie enemies are looters, whereas what you're doing is just wealth redistribution, right? Speaking of flaming boxing gloves, the USP this time around is that objects can be combined into special weapons. The combinations that actually work, though,
los memes que salieron de todas las combinaciones de armas y eso que puedes crear. Es más, a ver, Dios beso que esto no sea algo que pueda tumbar YouTube o Twitch. Más por Twitch, conociendo Twitch, los mamón de mierda que... Soy un idiota, llevo 2 horas mostrando una pantalla en negro con nada. Oh, Dios mío, acabo de malgastar 40 minutos. Genial, malgastamos 40 minutos de ustedes solo escuchándome hablar y no vieron un carajo la pantalla. Dios mío, tengo que empezar a chequear los streams en el celular. Ok, tengo que empezar a chequear los streams en el celular. Me lleva la chingada. Yo soy el pendejo esta vez. O sea, pueden burlarse, pueden hacerme bullying. Háganme bullying en Discord, me vale madres. En fin, este youtuber... A ver, ¿dónde está este...? Aquí. Ok, aquí está. No. Shh. No quiero copyright. Uno de los memes favoritos siempre me hablan. ¿Cómo describirías Dead Rising 2 en un video meme? ¿Cómo lo describiría? Bastante simple. Déjame decirte de qué forma inteligente te puedo describir el Dead Rising 2. Sí, así de simple lo describo el Dead Rising 2. Así de simple después de escribir el Dead Rising 2. Ah, que es bonito. Ah, que es bonito el Dead Rising 2. Oh, Dios santo. Sí, así es literalmente el Dead Rising 2. Algo bastante bonito y simple que es eso. Menos mil. Como vamos loquendo de esa época. Pero en fin, puedes crear cualquier tipo de arma con cualquier cosa. Es más, creo que hay... ¿Cuánto hay combinaciones de armas en Dead Rising 2? Esperen, vamos a chequear. Hay 50 cartas de combinación de armas que puedes usar. Oh, incluyendo las otras que están en las empaciones, pero en total son casi 50. Damn. 50. Y lo recomiendo bastante. Busquen la verdad cómo son las armas. Hay armas que son muy lógicas y hay armas que están demasiado fumadas. No me sorprende que eso sea el legado de Dead Racing hasta el día de hoy con Dead Racing 5.
A little bit arbitrary and experimentation is largely fruitless. The game will let you tape a machete to a broom handle, but not, say, a Bowie knife or a meat cleaver or an angry cat. It all smacks of adventure game logic, with only the one thing the developer thought of being acknowledged, as in you can use the broom to knock the giant moustache off the Washington Monument, but not the bamboo stick because you need that to appease the angry panda 6 rooms from now. Most of the combinations are maybe good for a quick giggle at the novelty, but there are only a handful of efficient day-to-day go-to combos. For example, once you do tape a fire axe to a sledgehammer, the game might as well just roll the credits, because anything that gets in the way of it will have a head resembling a Cornish pasty being hit by a car. I beat most of the boss fights just by wailing on them with it, tanking their attacks and necking orange juice like a dehydrated Floridian. The best part of playing Dead Rising 2 is when I decide to stop, but that's not the smug wanky criticism it sounds like. After I save the game, I say, right, tomorrow I will reload that save, so everything I do now is consequence-free. Then I can run around experimenting, testing new combos, trying on women's dresses, and breaking wind into the phone every time my support character reminds me to find medication for my terminally ill child. Taking on the zombie hordes with a lawnmower blade strapped to the top of your head is exactly the kind of serious Sam over-the-top fun violence action games need more of these days. What I like about it is that it's a true water cooler game, and I'm not talking about all that Facebook game bollocks where you can boast to all your friends because you stuck a radish up an imaginary cow's arse. You get together with your other Dead Rising 2 playing mates and you can discuss for hours what combos you found, boss fighting tactics, and where to find the chainsaws and mankinis. Perhaps a romance could blossom that will last a lifetime if you discover similar tastes in weapons and women's clothing, but what we don't want to know is what you'll do on the first date. I did some adding up once. To produce enough webs inside his body to fight crime on a regular basis, Spider-Man would need to eat the equivalent of 300 quarter-pounder cheeseburgers a day. That would be considered excessive for the London Philharmonic Orchestra, but it's futile to examine this sort of thing scientifically. Spider-Man comics are a lot like the Bible, in that neither have been known to let little things like science get in the way of their fun. Case in point, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. While foiling a museum robbery by some bloke who looks like he was dressed by the Liberace space program, Spider-Man accidentally shatters the magical tablet of MacGuffin, scattering its bits across 4 dimensions of time and space. Because of magic, I guess. See, this shit wouldn't fly with Batman. If any magic tablet tried to scatter itself across dimensions on his watch, he'd just will himself into existence and punch the writer until he promised to stop being such a twat. Shattered Dimensions plays like marketing material for Marvel Comics' range of alternate Spider-Man continuities. You see, every now and again, some writer at Marvel's creativity-fueled Dream Factory gets bored of repeatedly typing the words "Spider-Man punches the villain in the face" and transfers the characters to a different setting or time period so they can instead type "Spider-Man punches the villain in the face in space." The game alternates mission to mission between 4 continuities. The original Spider-Man, who must by now be the same age as Keith Richards, Ultimate Spider-Man, the teenage one whose every line of dialogue makes me want to wedgie him so hard his bollocks burst out the top of his head, Spider-Man 2099, the one in the future whose blog makes me want to wedgie him.
Linkin Park, sabiendo que Linkin Park estuvo en Argentina.
Him so hard his bollocks burst out the top of his head, Spider-Man 2099, the one in the future whose costume looks like someone attacked it with radioactive tomato ketchup, and Spider-Man Noir, a 1930s version who wants to be Batman so hard it burns inside his gritty vagina like a case of the spider clap. Now, even before I started playing it, this game sounded spread so thin that if it arrived on a sandwich it would essentially be bread. But this was based on the assumption that the claim that each Spider-Man continuity features vastly different gameplay was actually true. How hopelessly naive of me. The 2 questionably named Spider-Mans, Amazing and Ultimate, as well as 2099, are basically identical sequences of punching lots of little things before moving on to punch a big thing, although Mr. 29...
Eso es cierto, es casi lo mismo combo de peleas, casi todos, cada uno tiene obviamente su nivel preparado para ellos, como por ejemplo Miles Morales cuando se tiene que enfrentar al Goblin, o por ejemplo el Spider-Man North cuando tienen que enfrentarse a Cabeza de Martillo. Es cierto que muchos se repiten, exceptuando el de North, que ya lo explica Yathzeee creo, pero casi todo es combo, patada, vuélvete loco, combo, patada, vuélvete loco. Luego cuando en Ultimate tienes el poder de volverte insano con el traje de Venom, es volverte más loco pero solo haciendo más daño. Aunque cada pelea tiene su modo interesante de enfrentarse a los boss, eso es algo así, le doy mucho puntaje al Spider-Man Shattered Dimension.
99 can use bullet time and Mr. Ultimate can throw a hissy fit. Noir is the only universe with different core gameplay, being mostly stealth-based, and I know, Spider-Man, it was very cheeky of Batman Arkham Asylum to rip off all your major shticks, swinging from perch to perch, dangling baddies upside down from things. That was all you. Perhaps you were well within your rights to rip off Arkham Asylum, but you could have helped your case a lot more if you'd been as good. If you'd also ripped off the enemy AI that could actually outfox a piece of blue tack, rather than march cheerfully back to their patrol routes because they haven't been punched in the face by an intruder within the last 6 seconds. But even the Noir section missions aren't above descending into the occasional knuckle smorgasbord, and this is the problem I've always had with a lot of Spider-Man games. The very concept has this inbuilt, unique game mechanic with the web-slinging thing, but it always just comes down to punching things. I appreciate that the average superhero only has barely enough...
Es un juego de Spider-Man. Creo que no sería hasta el Spider-Man, el último Spider-Man de PC, si no me falla la memoria, que empezarían a experimentar con el sigilo. Y ese sigilo después empezarían a tratar de aumentarlo un poco, no tanto obviamente, pero casi igual, con el Spider-Man de PlayStation 4.
Enough mental capacity to break things and speak aloud every slightest thought that crosses their mind, but Spider-Man 2 had a strong web-slinging focus and it was fucking awesome, so do the arithmetic. While you can never accuse Shattered Dimensions of being monotone with its variety of colourful villains and settings, all you mostly do is fight the same three tiers of henchmen. Little ones who exist solely to be smacked around like one of those clacky ball executive toys, medium ones who have completed the chapter on blocking in the standard issue Teach Yourself Martial Arts book, but not the one about avoiding being punched into the air and swung around like a kite made of stakes, and the big burly motherfuckers with poor English skills who inevitably wield giant mallets and have a serious weakness to being punched in the butt. Most admissions just end up being linear processions of rooms full of these lads, but on the occasions when it gets away from this formula, Shatty Dims has its quite entertaining moments. It certainly comes alive during the Deadpool chapter, where you're given more freedom to swing around, although Deadpool is voiced by Nolan North, who I'm sure is a perfectly nice man in real life, but every character he voices makes me want to pull off my thumb.
¿En serio Nolan North fue el que hizo la voz de Deadpool en inglés? Me parte el alma. Eso, fuera de joda, no lo sabía, pues yo jugué la versión española, si no me falla la memoria, hace un par de años, así que no sabía eso. Mira tú. Aunque es cierto, los niveles de Deadpool es un cabrón. Dios, que me cagué de risa y sufrí con Deadpool en sus varias peleas. Recomiendo mucho no lo jueguen en dificultad difícil. No digo meme, en dificultad difícil es un dolor de huevos pelear con Deadpool. No lo hagan, no lo hagan. Por más lo que quieran, no lo hagan.
Which brings me to one of my major problems with Shattered Dimensions, that there's not a single character who can shut their fucking mouth for 5 seconds. When it comes to in-combat...
Well, es Spider-Man. Es como decirle al mismo Deadpool, cállate 2 segundos, sabes que no puede. Es como Silver. Es mi panecito de Dios que porque es autista igual que yo, no puede dejar de hablar por 2 segundos. Le está pidiendo mucho al pobre Spider-Man. Spider-Man es casi siempre el don comedia, el don serio cada 2 segundos. Eso lo sabe hasta el no muy fan de Spider-Man.
Dialogue, stick to things like ow or ooh ya or take that if you really want to flex those writing muscles. I'm sure your mum thinks your stand-up set is solid gold, but even a line that won the International Totally 100% Hilarious Award from Jesus Christ is going to get old after it's been drooled out 15 times in the same fight. This tends to happen a lot in video games. I think game writing as a whole is in dire need of more discipline. Come to think of it, the entirety of shitty retentions could use a few nipple clamps to calm it down. It flits restlessly and disconnectedly from encounter to encounter like an unmanned fire hose before, God forbid, any of the subplots can gain any depth or anything. It's fitting that Stan Lee does the narration, because the game as a whole reminds me of Stan Lee's...
Extraño Stan Lee. Dios mío, extraño a muerte a Stan Lee. No fui fan de Marvel, pero puedo decir que Stan Lee era un alma de 1 en 1.000.000. Ah, Dios santo. Extraño de corazón a Stan Lee. Extraño de corazón a Stan Lee, cabrones. Como no tienen una puta idea.
His public persona, and that they both seem to be trying way too hard to be liked. It's the weird little fat boy who hangs around the cool kids, desperately changing outfits and mannerisms, hoping to finally be accepted, and who will probably get expelled for stealing girls' underpants while they're in the showers and sniffing them, and he didn't even know why he was doing it. He just saw it on an anime the previous night and thought people would think it was funny. But he'll always love you, that little fat boy, no matter how many spiders you make him eat. Are we friends now? He'll ask, thorax dripping from his chin. No, Shattered Dimensions, we will never be friends, because you're buggy and unfocused and you smell like old pants. Normally I spend the first paragraph of these little tonsil exercise sessions leading into things with some rambling spiel of only borderline relevance, like maybe in this case wondering aloud if one could you'd have to retain your like a reference and a random zombie.
He escuchado cosas de ese Castlevania, pero una de las cosas que mucho lo he escuchado de ese Castlevania, no se ofendan, lo voy a jugar obviamente, pero mucho de lo que he notado y muchos han dicho y se nota que tal vez sea cierto, es poca parte explorativa y mucho más como si fuera un The Colossus. Solo tienes que pelear con monstruos gigantes, casi siempre montándote en ellos y ya. Pero lo probaría este canal.
Heavy attacks. But before I can bring down my well-used like God of War but stamp, like the terrible hammer of judgment that it is, the game dodges my swing and goes, wait, here's something original. Every now and again you have to have thrilling boss fights with monsters so big you have to ledge climb all over their bodies, pausing to hold on when they try to thrash you around like a little murderous nipple tassel, and chip away at their health by pecking at glowing weak spots. Say, I reply, another word for giant monster is Colossus, isn't it? And
Eso, el Colossus.
know what you're thinking, retorts Castlevania Lords of Shadow of the Colossus, but we're not like that game at all. That game had 16 Colossi and we've got 3. That's a completely different number. So where do you want this like God of War butt stamp? I ask, after an embarrassed cough. On my face, please. So far, Castlevania Boards of Plywood is like a lot of things. It's like God of War, but also like Shadow of the Colossus, and it gets a bit Dante's Inferno-y at times, especially when Satan shows up looking like Marilyn Manson, coming out of the shower wearing a towel made of Vegemite. But the one thing it doesn't feel like is a Castlevania game. There's none of the free roaming element that characterizes what some incredible...
Es muy diferente. Eso sí he notado que es muy diferente a todos los Castlevania que he jugado.
Genius termed Metroidvania, nor indeed is there any Dracula. I'd have thought the very first thing you do when starting out on a Castlevania game is write the word Dracula in the middle of a big piece of paper and work it out from there. He only shows up right at the very end in a way that seems to have been pulled right out of the story writer's biggest and sweatiest arse. Not that I'm demanding everything remain within the same formula forever, but if you're not going to have Dracula or free roaming, then calling the game Castlevania seems rather misleading when what you're actually making is God of War Germanic Mythology Edition. And it's not even a good imitation of God of War. It gets as far as the nice scenery, but it's racked with the usual issues a fixed camera brings. If a monster is outside your field of vision and about to attack, then your first warning is when your gizzards flutter prettily across the room. Coupled with the amateurish and sometimes confusing level design, the toughest fight in the game is with 3 standard enemies because you have to do it in a broom cupboard while the camera is busy staring at the mantelpiece. Meanwhile, I beat every single non-Colossus boss fight by flicking quick attacks at them and dodge rolling away before they could react like a packet of digestive biscuits on the deck of a lifeboat. You have 2 magic bars, light magic and dark magic. Blimey, there's a dichotomy rarely seen in video games. So whenever
Sí, algunos he visto muchos videojuegos.
magic pickups are up for grabs, you have to press in the left or right thumbstick to decide what flavour you want, but the thumbstick buttons don't flow naturally into gameplay at the best of times, and in the middle of pitched battle it's like stopping halfway through sex to wipe off the phlegm you just coughed onto your lover's forehead, and then your lover stabs you. The other thing is it's a fucking long game, it comes on 2 DVDs, so if you have any inclination to replay previous...
Más si vas a un modo complexionista, he visto que tiene bastante cosas y tiene mucha rejugabilidad. Eso es algo que lo he visto.
levels to find all the upgrades, the disc swapping will be gleefully kicking the back of your seat the whole way. It does have some actually rather cleverly designed puzzles, but practically apologises for it and gives the option to skip them. That's like providing the option to skip past all the paintings in the National Portrait Gallery so you can concentrate on staring at the floor. How about an option to skip your boring, repetitive, quick-time event-rattled boss fights, Castlevania Lords of Shadow? So basically my first instinct was completely correct on this one. If a game has a Portal reference, whatever purpose it serves, it tells you everything you need to know about the absolute wankers who had creative control of the thing. If Portal had the comedic value of a perfectly timed fart, then Portal references at this stage are a fart that has been going on for about 6 or 7 minutes, and now the stench in the room is causing bouts of spontaneous vomiting, and a strange blood-flecked liquid is dripping from the perperpetrator's anus. If you said to me, sci-fi reimagining of another culture's mythology mostly concerned with robots, I would immediately
Ok, creo.
think too human and punch you in the bollocks for reminding me.
Sí, esto es lo que ya vimos de Too Human. Ok, vamos a 2011 entonces. Chiste pendejo de entonces porque los conozco. En fin, vamos a ver. Yathzeee 2011, sorpréndeme.
Ho, ho, etc. And let me welcome you back to reality after the hopefully satisfactory completion of your respective annual rituals. Personally, I consumed roughly my weight in chocolate and crashed like a hypothetical blowjob-powered motorbike, so now I'm ready to face the new year. And the best way to face the new year is arse first, with eyes drunkenly half-focused on the year just past. Rather than going through my tissue-thin awards charade this year, I thought I'd just cut to the chase and give my top 5 and my bottom 5 of 2010. Almost like a real critic. You'll know when I switch from one to the other, because during the top 5 I'll speak with breathless enthusiasm like I've cornered you at the buffet table at the most excruciating party of your life, and then when I'm doing my bottom 5, my voice will drop in pitch and become filled with disgust, like my sandwich just farted in my mouth. My number 5 best game may come as a surprise in that it's on the Kasplar, but I feel restricting the top list to the overpriced AAA Unreal Engine dummy box and EB
No recuerdo esa música. ¿Por qué hay música?
games for the entire 6 months before release. Big Boys Club would send the wrong message to the bloated, uncreative technocrat design committees that control the industry. Sorry, wrong voice. Top 5, enthusiasm, rapture. So number 5 is Limbo from Playdead Studios.
Limbo es un bonito juego indie. Lo tengo hoy para comprar en Steam.
Short but stark physics platformer as genuinely unnerving as Eastern European animation and best analogized as Little Big Planet visualized by a suicidal depressive. Appropriately, number 5 on my bottom list is a product of the very bloated, uncreative Big Boys Club I railed against mere sentences ago, namely BioShock 2. It had 1 gunshot wound to the kneecap even before...
Como dije, No es perfecto, pero es un buen Bioshock 2 para mí. En algunas cosas estoy de acuerdo, en algunas cosas no estoy tan de acuerdo con Yathzeee.
Before it left the gate, being a hasty sequel to a game that had no opening nor need for a sequel, and proceeded only to stumble through incomprehensibility, with its only bright moments being its occasional resemblance to its infinitely better predecessor. At least it didn't have the pipe dream minigame, but that's like saying at least my horse costs less to feed now that it's dead. Getting back to happy, enthusiastic Smiley Town, number 4 is counterintuitively another dismal, traumatizing experience, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. In the mainstream industry where survival...
Repito, jugaría Amnesia, pero soy un cagón de mierda y voy a despertar a mi viejo a las 3 de la mañana con el grito que pegué, así que agradezcan que no estoy jugando Amnesia.
Horror now means action adventure wherein monsters from the back page of HR
O al menos hasta que logre la independización, lo que pase primero.
Geiger's teenage sketch diary do the Charleston under neon disco lighting, Amnesia showed everyone how horror is done. Unspeakable monstrosities half glimpsed out of the corner of the eye, no means of self-defense besides a sprint function, and dolphin unsafe tuner occasionally extruding from the walls. From the far, far, far other end of the spectrum comes my 4th worst game of 2010, Final Fantasy XIII, a game to which subtlety is as alien a concept as...
Muchas cosas te voy a decir para Final Fantasy XIII, muchas cosas no bonitas. Por algo estoy tratando de terminarme todos los Final Fantasy, porque me quiero reservar para todo lo que voy a decir de cosas de Final Fantasy 3.
Smart casual. The message Square Enix now seem to be bringing across is, we just want to make films. How much more gameplay do we need to remove before you'll figure that out? We've pared it down to the point where all you do is clop down linear hallways and let AI subroutines do the combat for you. Now stop expecting us to make games so we can remake Spirits Within. But you just can't take the hint and stop buying Final Fantasy, can you, you cruel bastards? Back in the top 5, the prevalence of indie games so far may make you wonder if I've become so pretentious that I won't give the time of day to anything that costs more to make than an egg and cress sandwich, but that changes with number 3, Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar's Old West Odyssey might have suffered a little from a bit of kitchen sink approach to gameplay, a kitchen sink full of brown washing up, but overall was like throwing yourself onto a mattress made of soft meringue, unstructured but oddly satisfying, and now you can play it with zombies in, which still baffles me. Do you get a tax break if you make a zombie game or something? The 3rd worst game of 2010 demonstrates that there is no once profitable franchise so dead that you cannot jump on its stomach and sell whatever liquids come out of its nose. The Force Unleashed 2. With Star Wars almost at the point where putting its name on your product might actually reduce sales, the last thing it needed was this, a game both exhaustively padded and insultingly short, and therefore must have been entirely developed over a bank holiday weekend. With an inconsequential plot in which characters desperately try to out-emote a Christmas pudding, I'd call it the last nail in Star Wars' coffin, but we won't even be able to put the lid on before people stop queuing up to rape its corpse. Just to make me a hypocrite, my second best game of 2010 is a zombie game, or rather the zombie game, Dead Rising 2. Ironing out Dead Rising 1's sizable wrinkles of unreasonable difficulty and AI on the level of a bucket of retarded pies, Rising 2 is on one level a uniquely colourful take on sandbox gameplay, and on another a game in which you plough through crowds of squishy antagonists with many varieties of sharp things on the ends of sticks. It is rather dumb fun, but dumb people are a great laugh to have around because you can make them eat bugs and touch fences that you suspect might be electrified. Now if I were doing mock awards this year, number 2 in my bottom 5 would win the Farting the Moonlight Sonata award for desecration of classics. I mean none other than the execrable Metroid Other M. Team Ninja gave Samus Aran a voice just so she could simper at all the...
De Metroid, espero que no estén escuchando eso. De Metroid he escuchado muchas cosas. Ninguna bonita. Muy pocas bonitas, pero ninguna bonita de Metroid.
Boys, making Metroid heavily story-based was the first mistake, and mistakes 2 through 75 all involved turning one of gaming's toughest female icons into a shrieking mimsy in a submissive relationship with a bell end in a fancy cap, which perhaps could have eventually been overlooked, but the gameplay was just kinda shit. And so we moved to number 1, my game of the year. There were no completely faultless games in 2010, least of all this one, but after 3 years of a new game every single week, riding the game criticism rails like the shoutiest hobo, my attention span has degraded to the point that there were only 2 games this year that I wanted to keep playing after I'd reviewed them. Dead Rising 2 was one, and the other, stalling tactic, was Just Cause 2. An almost Garry's Mod-like bundle of free-roaming fun tied up in a loose but still involving...
Digo, Just Cause 2, que se le puede decir al juego más grande del mundo, con tantos coleccionables y cosas que hacer, que son muy pocos las almas bastardas, yo por ejemplo, que logran completar la saga. No los culpo, porque literalmente es un juego que si quieres hacer el 100%, considera un año. No estoy diciendo memes, considera un año. Un año lo vas a tardar, y con guía, 1 año y medio. Créame, ese es el Just Cause 2.
Gameplay
es el
structure in a
verdadero
world about
prueba
twice
de
the size of the
completionista,
entire
brother.
universe, any criticism I might have given it is drowned out by the terrified scream of an enemy soldier with one leg tied to a Harrier jet. But to the yin must come the yang, to the cream must come the cheese, to the giddy high of new love must come irritable bowel syndrome, the worst game of the year, a game less substantial than a fart in a lift, but no less unpleasant for those caught in its wafting cage, a game that killed its franchise so thoroughly that the only acceptable sequel would be a box containing nothing but an apology letter and some chocolates. I refer, of course, to Halo Reach. Burned you going for a second there, didn't I? Actually, it's Fable 3. Burned again. No, seriously now. A game I found literally as headache-inducingly unpleasant as impacted wisdom teeth surgery in the middle of a rave. Step forward, Kane and Lynch 2, Dog Days. Step onto your first place podium, then put a rope around your neck so we can kick it away. Like a drunken concert-goer guffawingly yelling for Freebird, a video on World of Warcraft has oft been requested of me, and like the struggling guitarist of raising a hilarious middle finger while making a mental note to attempt suicide later in the evening, I have resisted. How exactly does one review an entity like World of Warcraft? Do you go by its entertainment value as a game or its fucking body count? Because factoring in lost man hours and all those dead...
Yo quisiera traer God of Warcraft, pero hay tres cositas. Número uno, salió Shadowland, lo cual es el bodrio más grande del mundo. Es la cagada tan enorme que no puedo ni siquiera decir God of Warcraft sin mencionar esa mierda que costó dinero, que es la historia más horrible y que lo único que sirvió de excusa es para decir a una no muerta: la cagué, me perdonan, hartas me perdonas, chingas a tu madre. Nos comimos 6 expansiones siendo los villanos número 3 otra vez y tu única excusa es decir lo lamento. Garrosh no murió en una batalla para que digas esa puta mamada, pinche no muerta de mierda. Así que pueden imaginarse, esa es la razón número 1 de por qué carajos yo no estoy hablando o no tocando sobre Warcraft, chicos. Porque odio a muerte Shadowlands y voy a maldecir Shadowlands cada rato si yo a tocar Warcraft. Ese es el número 1. El número 2 se trata de que obviamente todo lo que ha pasado ahora con Activision Blizzard con el tema de que se están cerrando servidores privados. Y número 3, los servidores privados que existen o los pocos que están existiendo en God of Warcraft son todos buggies. Son todos demasiado bugueados. No hay uno que no tenga un bug o que no sea casi al nivel de que pueda tener el God of Warcraft original, más para las misiones, porque todos esos servers son solo para PvP. Son muy pocos los que tienen para PvE y aún para el PvE están todos bugueados las misiones, no puedes avanzar en la historia en las mismas dungeons por culpa de eso. Así que imagínatelo.
Neglected children, it's got to be roughly up there with a fairly major natural disaster, but the release of the Cataclysm expansion seems like an obvious time for a retrospective, in that I firmly believe it is the reason absolutely fuck all else came out in December. Actually, that's not true. There was Tron Evolution and Mario All-Stars. Oh well, do they know it's Christmas time? So World of Warcraft, also known as WoW, as in wow, I can't believe it's been that long since I last had a wash. Over the Christmas period, I decided to use my annual small injection of free time to level a character as far as I could, and you little motherfuckers better appreciate this, because hanging yourself on Christmas Day is slightly less depressing than spending it playing World of Warcraft. My original intention was to use the time to get up to level 85 and see all the areas, and maybe for an encore I could...
¿Recuerdan cuando el nivel máximo era 85 en vez de 110 o 120? Además ya llegué a 110 con orgullo. Perdí vida social, pero llegué con orgullo al nivel 110 y lo volvería a hacer. Y lo volvería a hacer.
could eat an entire mahogany dining table. In the end, I could only make it to 60, but that would do. That was high enough to acquire a flying mount, so I could fly over low-level Alliance areas and blow raspberries. Because what kind of loser plays Alliance, honestly? Since the Blood Elves joined the Horde, they don't even have the excuse of having the hottest chicks anymore. In theory, anyway. I've always thought it a bit odd that the male or...
Nadie quiere a la Alianza al menos que seas un cobarde bastardo que solo quiere un healer para su healer, para su healer, su healer, para ganar los PvPs, diciendo, he curado a 2 personas, tengo las mejores cosas, somos los buenos, chingas a tu madre.
Trolls and undead are all hunched, twisted monsters, and the females are all basically just discoloured human hotties with bad dentistry. I mean, come on, trolls have tits. Do they breastfeed their kids while their tusks are coming out? They'd gouge out their fucking lungs. I may have given some subtle hints in the past that I've played WoW before. Subtle hints such as an entire fucking book, published by Dark Horse, available on Amazon. Buy now, beat the rush. Way before all your newfangled burning crotch saids and Wraths of the Bitch Queen, I levelled an undead mage up to level 58 in vanilla caffeine-free World of Warcraft over the course of about 3 months, during which I was about as productive as a dead dog nailed to an armchair. So now would be a good time to see how many changes have occurred. Quite a few.
Luego Warcraft requiere mucho tiempo. Y es cierto. Solo para darles un contexto ¿Quieren saber cómo era mi vida a diaria como un armero World of Warcraft? 5 minutos de ver la lista de que tengo que farmear. 3 putas horas de conseguir todas las piedras, todas las maderas, todas las cosas. 5 segundos para hacer la arma. 3-4 horas rezando de que llegue a ganar aunque sea 5 de oro y maldiciendo al mercado ficticio, que es por la razón por la cual hoy todos aprenden mercado. No ha aprendido mercado porque les habló su padre o por el colegio, es porque un hijo de su puta madre no sabe por qué su arma que vale 5 oro no puede vender nada, mientras uno que vale 30.000 de oro, que es una skin culera, puede venderse como pan caliente. Eso, y cuenta cuando estés paseando por las dungeons y las raids. Si lo haces con amigos son 6 horas. Más preparación, no miento. Cuando empecé con Legion, nos tomaba 1 hora y media prepararnos y casi 2 horas, mínimo 2 horas y media completar la raid. Y para una dungeon, sí, una dungeon no si lo haces bien y al menos los iniciantes saben las mecánicas y cómo prepararse con los hechizos y eso, no te tomaría ni menos de 20-25 minutos, la verdad. Pero créame, es un juego que requiere tiempo absorbente, aun cuando seas el más OP de todos. Es un juego que te consume la vida diaria, como la chamba o mirar televisión hoy en día. Y digo hoy en día por la televisión basura, ya saben.
Here, you'd almost think there'd been a cataclysm of some description. There's a jungle in South Barrens that wasn't there before. The Thousand Needles appear to have pissed themselves, and lest we forget, there are 2 new races to play as. Goblins, hauntingly reminiscent of the Ferengi from Star Trek, right down to the huge ears, but then what doesn't have huge ears in this fucking game? Our technocratic profiteers who get to start off driving rocket cars around a steampunk funland, while the Worgen are big hairy cockneys who get to run around one of World of Warcraft's 93 forests. Honestly, fuck the Alliance. So I set off as a goblin mage because I was a mage before. It's a good class for soloists. Half your spells are for destroying people from the next town over, and the other half are apologising and running away. There have been a lot of changes to mage spells. You no longer have to buy the latest models every few levels like they're developed by Apple, and there's a new spell you get around level 50 called Mirror Image, which might as well be called Reap On Ye Fucking Reaper Man. It spawns 3 copies of you that all do magic, and enemies always attack them instead of you. With this armament I could embark on elite quests intended for parties of 3 and fashion the boss monsters into stylish clogs. That possible balance issue aside, I do think WoW is a well-designed game. It wouldn't have systematically murdered all its competitors otherwise. The colourful cartoonish visual style has aged quite well, and Cataclysm...
Yo siempre voy a decir honestamente, mis top 5 de favoritos van a ser: número 1 va a ser Legión, número 2 va a ser Kata, número 3 va a ser Lynch King, número 4 va a ser Burning Crusade, número 5 va a ser esa mierda de Shadowland. Y todos saben por qué todos los fans de Warcraft hablamos mal de Shadowland. No existe un alma en vida que hable bien de Shadowland. Es como el que habla bien de la pizza con piña. Solo lo conoces porque el bastardo nunca la perra vida lo ha probado.
and brought further improvement by removing a lot of the piss-taking quests that ask you to gather 20 of something that are only dropped by one bloke 3% of the time, and replacing them with quests where you ride around in a van solving mysteries. Having said all that, World of Warcraft is completely evil. Let me tell you a story. I like how the Fast Travel Network has you ride flying monsters between destinations. It helps the world open up somewhat and makes me feel like I'm in the never-ending story. And it also means I can alt-tab out and have a quick jerk-off if I get bored. But on one occasion, when I alt-tabbed back, the land was wreathed in flames and I'd received an achievement for being killed by Deathwing, who is apparently some big shot around these parts. Whereupon my guild...
No es meme. Esto es algo que creo que es antecedente de un Dark Souls. Ganas un logro al morir con Deathwing la primera vez. Y es comprensible porque créanme, he escuchado la historia de gente que ha estado 7 horas preparándose para ganar a Deathwing cuando fue los inicios de Kata. Y son una de las pesadillas más horribles que pueden vivir tanto las personas que lo vivieron como las personas que lo ven. Y tengo un amigo que tiene traumas de Vietnam para cuando salió Kata, porque él literal dijo, y voy a explicarlo más o menos lo que recuerdo de sus palabras hace un par de años, si es que lo recuerdo bien. Pelearse con Deathwing es como ir a la cancha de River, decir vamos Boca, mientras estás vistiendo una camisa independiente y estás vistiendo una bandera diciendo que Maradona es mejor que Messi. Literalmente estás pidiendo la muerte sin siquiera saberlo.
mates congratulated me, and that's what struck me as odd. Were they perhaps saying, wow, you just got murdered in a way that breaks up the monotony of our utterly pointless existence, you're so lucky? But then I caught the two-faced bastards congratulating someone in the same way for getting one of those baby's first achievements, you know, complete 3 quests without falling off a chair and breaking your spine. And I realised that typing grats upon seeing the word achievement is just another programmed response, because that's what WoW does, it programs you. After just a few weeks, the vibrant swoosh of the level up sound was as fulfilling to me as my child's first word. I wasn't even reading the quest descriptions anymore. Last time I stopped playing because there were no more lands to see. This time I stopped because as I flew higher and higher on my new mount and could see to the edge of the shitty draw distance, I saw the last few weeks of my life unfold beneath me. Go here, keep running around killing the pallet swaps du jour until they give you a permission slip for the next valley of pallet swaps. I got out while I still could, and anyone who wants to bring up endgame content can feel free to suck an orc's willy. I asked someone who raids, why do you raid? To get the best items, they said. What do you use the best items for? I asked. To which they could only answer, to raid with. But it's not about items, is it? You don't honestly care if your new crystal nether sword is going to clash with your elite boss clogs. It's about...
Para el mercado roto, no se olviden, para el mercado roto. El mercado de hoy en día de Warcraft no es nada comparado con los rotos que está el mercado de Warcraft, o al menos cuando estaba cuando entré en Legion.
The numbers. You want the items with the best numbers, so you can use your numbers to decrease the enemy numbers until your numbers are the best in the land, and all the other guilds flock to regard your numbers with jealous awe. And before you argue that lots of games are about numbers when you get down to it, no one ever ruined their lives to get 100% items in Super Metroid. It's okay, publishers. WoW Cataclysm is out now. You can come out from behind the sofa. No? Alright, well, I'll try to lure them out with a saucer of milk and some hot IP. Let's talk about a game from last year I never got around to. If only to stop people plobbing on about it. The fact that Fable has a large following is like the existence of the appendix of the biological compulsion to have 18 kids that's exclusive to rednecks. It's one of the little things about humanity I find completely incomprehensible. Okay, it's fairly unique, but then so is an asbestos and bacon sandwich. Okay, it's a reliable meal ticket for every out-of-work comedic voice actor in the United Kingdom, but Fable as a gaming property is just not very good. I suspect mainly its support comes from it being Xbox exclusive, because fanboys will angrily defend aggressive wasps if they're exclusively nested inside Xbox casings. So, in Fable 3, you are the younger brother or sister of the king of clearly not Victorian England, like Prince William, sort of attractive and popular alternative to the actual heir who everyone thinks is kind of shit. After waking up one morning from a hard night of fucking your dog, you go outside for presumably the first time in 20 years and notice that your brother is a murdering tyrannical despot like a steampunk Ming the Merciless. So off you go on an adventure to build support for a revolution, and I think I've realised what I don't like about Fable. It's essentially fascist. Heroism, rather than a quality anyone can exhibit, is reduced to some kind of inherent biological thing unique to a single genetic line of handsome white people. All the support characters who do the actual organising of the revolution take it as read that you will be king because you're the only one with the king genes, despite being an embarrassing, out-of-touch, mostly silent, privileged fop who fucks his dog. And I'm not even being disingenuous. When you pet your dog, it strongly resembles making out, especially when you dip it and stick your tongue down its throat like you're teaching it dirty dancing. At first I was lukewarm about Fable 3 because it didn't look like much had changed since Fable 2, a half-decent if slightly restrictive story campaign, the same 3 different forms of combat to switch between, and I've got to say I've never played a Fable game where I didn't end up spamming area of effect magic in every battle because enemies always swarm around you like aggressive Xbox-dwelling wasps. And as always, the game devotes large chunks of itself to side things no one asked for. It's not freedom, the Just Cause 2 hookshot or the portal gun. These mechanics offer freedom. The ability to marry random NPCs is just fannying about. It flummoxes me how Peter Molyneux persistently thinks anyone could seriously value one random NPC over the others when the extent of all their personalities is going boo when you overcharge at the shops you own, or yay because you danced around whistling like a retard. Actually, they've grown in sophistication somewhat in that now individuals will only become your friend if you go on a little fetch quest for them, because I remember thinking in Fable 2 what this relationship bullshit really needs is even less motivation to do it. But then something weird happens. I thought the game would end when the evil king was overthrown, but when the revolution batters down his door, he basically says, fine, you be king then. Oh, and by the way, an evil black primordial slime is going to come and slaughter us all 1 year from now. Toodly-oo. Then Fable 3 turns into Sim City meets the Sword of Damocles. You're given a number of decisions to make as ruler and must choose whether to continue your brother's evil policies in order to raise the arbitrary sum of 6 million gold coins required to fight off the black goo after the year's up, or blow the entire treasury on making the lives of your citizens happy if short, the Logan's Run option. Ooh, thought I, an unexpected twist, an actual moral dilemma, gold star, Peter. But no, the moral dilemma thing falls down because your decisions are still referred to as good and evil, even though the evil option is so everyone can still be alive next Christmas.
Exacto, es literalmente como dice, no importa si eres bueno o eres malo. Es más, está esta mecánica culera, que lo recuerdo cuando lo juego Fable 3 en mis... entre 20 o 20 y tantos, no puedo ser exacto allí, de que literalmente tienes que... no puedes gastar tu dinero, porque si lo gastas para proteger a ellos, estás cometiendo mal. No miento, literalmente ganas karma por usar dinero para literalmente proteger a tu condenado pueblo. Incluso si rechazas lo que te viene, porque van a haber pedidos de propuesta, de arreglos, entre otras cosas, entre tus aliados y eso, si les dices sí, es como que haces mal el final y lo terminas cagando peor. ¿Todo para qué? Para que total no afecte nada, solo que puedas conseguir el final bueno, entre comillas, porque el final bueno que yo saqué es literalmente salvamos a casi todos, pero se murieron algunos, así que no es el final perfecto, aun cuando hice todas las cosas bien, elegí todas las opciones casi correctas. Así que el final malo no me sorprendería fuera casi igual.
And why can't we keep the evil policies until the Shoggoth has come and gone, then reverse them all? Surely 1 year of hardship is better than 1 year of picnics followed by Armageddon. But no, not an option. Castle Albion was apparently built on a leaking gas main. And what really gets to me is that your character never explains their decisions. Horrors from beyond the veil of time and space are coming to eat us, so shut up seems like a pretty good draw card for a leader to have. At one point you can either drain a lake to mine the valuable resources within and pay for everyone to not die, that's the evil option, or you can leave it because it looks pretty. Lady, unless the natural beauty is outstanding enough to flummox dimensional shamblers, we're going with the option where we don't get worn as hats by cosmic monstrosities. Good or evil at this stage comes down more to liberal or conservative, and conservative policies, I admit, can be a bit callous when we're not about to be devoured. There is a third option for kings with working brains. Donate your own money. Now, there's two ways to make money. Busking, a monumentally awful minigame, but at the highest level of which your audience toss out money like coins have been linked to bubonic plague, and renting out property. So here was my cunning plan. After busking until my loot strings had severed all my fingers, I bought the most expensive properties and jacked up all the rent. The time leading to the deadline only passes in between story missions, and rented property exists in an alternate space-time continuum that pays out every 5 minutes of real time. So prior to doing the final story mission, I would simply leave the game on overnight with the TV off, lest anyone call me eco-unfriendly, then donate the subsequent mountain of gold to pay for all my nice benevolent decisions. Tee-hee, leadership's easier than I thought. This is what I would have done if the story hadn't suddenly and unexpectedly jumped forward 150 days and gone straight to the final battle. What? If only we'd been more prepared, said one NPC. Yeah, if only the king hadn't slipped into a fucking coma for 5 months and his tenants had paid their fucking rent. Not that it mattered, since after defeating the evil I got the ultra-good ending where everyone stands around congratulating my victory and my benevolence. Apparently no one wanted to be the guy to bring up the fact that 3/4 of the population were dead, and the only effect was that in the post-credit sandbox mode, the vast...
Y lo horrible, si quieres el final perfecto, tienes que salvarlo a todos, aun cuando tengas que tomar las decisiones malas, por lo cual es como, quiero ser bueno, pero voy a decapitarte para justificar de sacar el final perfecto bueno. ¿No te parece impresionante?
The vast majority of random NPCs had simply disappeared. And you know what? I call that a 100% positive result. My non-American viewers, who understand that the world does not consist only of a single nation sailing across an infinite sea of Mexican migrant workers, will no doubt have heard that the water around Brisbane got sick of waiting for people to come hit the beach and decided to bring the party to us. I don't keep up with the news, though, so it was only when I emerged blinking...
Tengo que dar agua a la perra. A ver, espere que me mutee y ya seguimos con lo de Yathzeee. Ok, ya volví, solo fui a darle un poco de agua a la perra.
From my grotto and saw that the sandbag fairy had visited all the good little shop doorways that I found out that the central business district had flooded. First thought, oh cock, all the nearest game retailers are in the CBD because some retarded pile of cartilage on the town planning department thought it would be a great idea to put 30 EB Games shops within the same 10 square yards. Second thought, oh balls, with humanitarian aid selfishly obstructing the delivery services, I won't be seeing any of my imports anytime soon either. Third thought, oh goody, that means I can go back inside and keep playing Minecraft. Minecraft is becoming as popular among computer nerds as a 6-button wireless mouse with...
Llámeme cerdo inculto, nunca jugué Minecraft. No, en serio, nunca jugué Minecraft. No es que no me guste, nunca me llamó la atención Minecraft. Esa es la razón número uno por la cual nunca lo jugué, es porque nunca me llamó la atención el Minecraft, tristemente. Así que vamos a ver cuál seguimos ahora. A ver, creo que es The Space. A ver.
Dollars a week to wash its
A
car so you
ver,
can save
allí.
up and gain an appreciation for value, and when you finally have your golden cock and balls, you'll love it all the more until Minecraft, as it will when your boss finds out what you spent your entire workday on. What's this? Some actual game releases in 2011? Fucking
Oh.
finally! Well, a release anyway, a 2D platformer on the Wii. Jeez, don't all crowd in at once,
pero
guys. Known
bueno.
as A Shadow's Tale in the Blimey Governor Chips
Pero
and
es de Wii. Maldita sea. Odio no tener consola, ta madre. A ver, vamos a saltar a otro porque no. No, pero es de Limbo. ¿Qué Limbo ya no habíamos visto? Ok, esto es raro, pues el Limbo ya habíamos visto, no sé por qué se está repitiendo. Estamos en el 2011, ¿no? Sí, estamos en el 2011, esperen. Vamos a ver otro. Ok, el de Dead Space 2.
a malfunctioning air conditioner. In case you were wondering, because I certainly was, dead space is a physiological term referring to air inhaled by the body that doesn't take part in gas exchange. So, for example, when you gasp with delight at the prospect of a new Dead Space game, some of the air you intake will not be absorbed by your alveoli and will be exhaled again when you sigh with irritation because a spindly sausage monster has jumped out of a vent for the 17th time that day. I shot my torch around in time one of those vents once and saw that there were no ways in or out. So either monsters grow in there like a fungus, or the monster carefully replaced the cover after climbing inside, perhaps to have a little sleep, perhaps when the time that day. I shot my torch around inside one of those vents once and saw that there were no ways in or out. So either monsters grow in there like a fungus, or the monster carefully replaced the cover after climbing inside, perhaps to have a little sleep. Perhaps what I interpreted as a hostile attempt to ambush me was in fact someone waking up in a panic and realizing they're late for work, which makes sense because if they were trying to ambush me, they could at least try hiding inside some other kind of vent once in a while. 3 years after the events of Dead Space 1, Ian M. Vonnegut has taken the standard route of horror story survivor aftermaths and wound up in the loony bin, still haunted by visions of that one lady he couldn't save, rather than the several hundred people whose corpses he desecrated, the selfish twat. In my review of Dead Space 1, I mocked it for trying to tap it. That's
Aguanta un
wound up.
minuto, chicos, me está costando escuchar. Voy a ver si pongo auricular más o menos. A ver. Espero que no afecte el micrófono, esperen, voy a hacer una prueba. A la vez.
Ah, yo quería que vos le muestres cómo es que se llamaba la chica esa que vos me mostraste que ganó el concurso.
Esperen, chicos, pues todo eso. Hola, ahora sí. Ahí está. Tuve que desenchufar el micrófono. Oh, ahí está. De paso se escuchó el eco de paso. Sí, ahí está. Tuve que... Sí, no va a servir con auricular. Vamos a tener que arreglarnos así que lamento si no logran escuchar nada. Por el tema de que con auricular... Sí, no llego a escuchar nada, mejor dicho. Por el tema de que con el auricular mata el micrófono. Así que... Voy a ver si puedo escuchar y si no repetiré las escenas.
In the loony bin, still haunted by visions of that one lady he couldn't save, rather than the several hundred people whose corpses he desecrated, the selfish twat. In my review of Dead Space 1, I mocked it for trying to tug my flinty heartstrings by inflicting personal tragedy upon a character with no voice, no personality, and a bucket on their head, which was like trying to make us feel sorry for a floor lamp because someone knocked it over. Well, Visceral Games took this on board. Isaac now lifts his hat more often than a Victorian gentleman in the lingerie department, and has a voice and a personality. It's just that they're completely generic. Not that I expected him to be voiced by Orson Welles, but I find it hard to coalesce Isaac...
Ojo, tampoco tan genérico. Ahí creo que le está dando un poquito a Yathzeee. O sea, es el típico men de Silent Hill, sí, pero diré que tiene una personalidad más diferente a las genéricas de las personajes de Silent Hill y demás, al menos para mí.
Bland, predictable responses with the mighty thunderous figure roaring with triumph as he stomps on a cardboard box. Anyway, necromorphs break loose on the station and Isaac must discover why. Chances are good it's something to do with those pesky unitologists, the infuriatingly widespread space religion whose central tenets are human unification and unrelenting denial. Another thing about Dead Space Uno I mentioned was that the USG here are the juicy humans yum yum didn't look like it had ever been a nice place to live and should be thankful all the bloods and corpses have thrown some colour around. That's another thing Dead Space 2 meets head on by setting its first half Bioshock style in a lovely residential area full of colourful, cheerful decor so it can be extra poignant when the blood gets everywhere, to a rather unrealistic degree unless everyone immediately got a nosebleed the moment the alarm sounded. The thing is though...
Vamos a ser honestos, todos recuerdan de Space por literalmente las desmembraciones y el tema del gore. Dudo que haya alguien que haya querido jugar Dead Space 2 por el tema del lore. Yo lo jugué por el lore, obviamente, y tengo que reconocer, hay partes que son aún violentas del juego. La escena del ojo, aún muchos lo recuerdan con odio y a la vez como lo más terrorífico. Pero a la vez es cierto de que el juego recurre mucho en el gore. Literalmente como cualquier género de terror hoy en día que uno conozca.
So it seems like the population of Titan Station was about 75% under the age of 12. Maybe life just gets really fucking boring every 9 months or so. Seems like early on for a while you go from one children's bedroom or elementary school to another. It's for poignancy points, obviously. All music boxes singing plaintively to themselves and bloodstained crayon drawings saying, I love mummy and being alive. And of course killer children are one of the new monsters. They flock around you like you're the fucking Wiggles. And I'm pleased to report the circular saw weapon is just as overpowered as before. And now all the carpets in Titan Elementary are going to need a lot of fucking shampoo. Since world-shaking innovation has been a bit dry in the games industry lately, Dead Space 2's gameplay is very similar to the first. There's even a level unapologetically copy-pasted from Dead Space 1, perhaps to demonstrate eco-friendliness, and combat still mostly things jumping out going boo, and you congratulating them on their prank by sawing all their arms and legs off. So let's focus on the differences. In Zero Gravity now, instead of leaping from wall to wall like a flying squirrel in body armor, you get to free float around with jetpacks, and I think I've implied before that there are very few situations that can't be improved by jetpacks, except perhaps dense clusters of extremely flammable objects. This leads to one or two of those Space Harrier-style minigames where you fly or fall towards something and bank around to avoid the debris coming off it, which is becoming curiously endemic to action games. I remember it being in God of War 3, Shattered Dimensions, Force Unleashed 2, Wet, Wolverine. That's the game Wet and the game Wolverine, not a game about a wet Wolverine. No such thing exists. It seems like there's every reason I should like Dead Space 2. It's horror, it's set in space, which is the best setting besides the land of chocolate lesbians, and now there are jetpacks in it, so why am I still not particularly moist? Well, another thing I said about Dead Space 1 was that it was about as subtle as a clown with his cock out. You start the game, and just when you think it's pacing itself and building the tension a bit, monsters pop out going argle bargle woggle and wiggle their shredded bums under the spotlight. Now, if I were a paranoid man, which I'm not, whatever people have been saying about me, I'd say Dead Space has started deliberately trying to provoke me. The very first thing that happens in Dead Space 2 is a bloke turning into a necromorph, fully illuminated and literally 6 inches away from your face. Then it grabs you by the lapels and screams at you while his eyes pop out. This is the horror equivalent of a small child banging its head on a wall so you pay it attention. Hey, look at me, are you scared yet? What if all the skin rolled off my face? Are you scared now? Ah, doing this really hurts actually. Ah, I currently represent threat in an extremely unspecific way. Ah! Dead Space can startle, but it doesn't horrify me. It pushes the horror so hard that it comes right around and starts being silly. There's no sense of weight to any of the gore. Everyone's about as attached to their limbs as that mountain climber bloke. When a body gets mangled or hacked apart, there's no sense of effort or that the flesh is resisting or even that it hurts much. The necromorphs seem to be able to hack off your knees by brushing past you in a narrow corridor. And do you know how hard it would be to sever a leg by stamping on it, you'd need to wear an ice skate, and even then the bone is going to take a few whacks, and the process by which a human turns into a necromorph is so fast it's meaningless. If it happened over time like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly and they could see and react to it happening, that would have carried emotional weights, but here it's stab, plop, away we go. All of this would be fine in a silly gore game like Resident Evil 4 or Splatterhouse, but Dead Space is trying to be taken seriously. You can't have it both ways, EA. Either stick everyone together with masking tape and dog food, or make evisceration actually mean something. Chopping my pinky finger off in Heavy Rain got to me 1,000,000 times more than anything in Dead Space 2 did, and the guy didn't even pull his own face off. It's one of those great personality gauging questions, isn't it? Do you prefer tits or bums? Sorry, do you prefer Marvel or DC? Or alternatively, do you prefer Marvel or DC or neither because you're not fucking 14? Only kidding, mostly. I read comics. I was quite big into Preacher when I was younger. A serial best summarised by a single moment within it when one of the main characters wipes a retard's bum before shooting him in the face. But I'm not into ongoing comics because to my mind a good story is like a good bowel movement. It's only really satisfying once it's ended. Because if you just keep going, then eventually your body runs out of shit and moves on to pushing all your internal organs out your sphincter until only a foul-smelling shell remains. Anyone who wants to get in on your incredibly long poo gets turned off because they need to have gone through all the poo up to that point to have the necessary context, and this is where the analogy is breaking down somewhat. Of course, one way to give context is to make a tie-in video game, but you do have to make sure it's not a load of old piss whiffle. On that note, DC Universe Online. Just for fun, let's examine the premise as if we don't know who any of these characters are. A bunch of poorly dressed motherfuckers have a great big apocalyptic punch-up until only one survives, whereupon aliens invade, so said survivor travels back in time, no they don't say how, put your arm down, and brings a warning to 2 rodeo clowns and a prostitute. Then he does a weird thing that bestows superpowers upon a whole bunch of random civvies. His assumption perhaps being that if the entire world consists of poorly dressed motherfuckers having a punch-up, then perhaps the aliens will just get freaked out and quietly
No lo
leave.
he jugado, así que me la salto, pero he escuchado que tratan de hacer un World of Warcraft pero estilo DC. Así que... A ver... ¿Cuál otro seguiría ahora? A ver, ¿cuál otro sigue ahora? Estilo de padres y demás.
Or not. I know, what morons. Yes, I exaggerate every slightest negative feature regardless of overall quality, but how else will developers learn? It's like Chinese parenting, but less nightmarish. I'll usually give a bit of a general summary towards the end, but I guess people might have trouble concentrating that long when they're mesmerised by the sexy jiggle of the fat rolls on a passing close relative. So in the name of keeping things nice and clear for you touchy sods, let me be as unambiguous as possible in this critique. Mine, Jack, is fucking bad. Don't play it. And if you kindly tell your cousin to go throw...
Muchos piensan que Concord ha sido un desastre, no conocen Mindjack. No conocen el desastre que hubo tras Mindjack. Es muchas cosas de mal en ese juego y todos están de acuerdo que Mindjack es una de las peores cosas que salieron. Nadie estuvo feliz con lo que salió con Mindjack. Quiero que ni siquiera los reviewers más adinerados del mundo de los videojuegos, así que pueden imaginarse que tan malo era. De palabra malo, de horrible, en todas las palabras. Ok, ¿de aquí qué está hablando? Two Words, otro que no ha atacado. Lo siento. ¿Por qué justo hoy en día de hoy de streaming está tocando casi la mitad de juegos que no he conocido, he escuchado o probado? A ver, ¿cuál otro tenemos? Al menos uno que yo vaya... Doom? Ah, no, Gears of Wars.
And shooters was a brazen lack of realism. Look at the Doom Marine, gamers would yell. He glides around at something approximating the land's speed record. It's so unrealistic. My immersion is melting down and dribbling out of my ears. And he can carry 15 heavy weapons on his person without herniating his entire spine. It's so unrealistic. And he has perfect aim without having to ram the butt of his gun up his fucking nostrils. It's so unrealistic. And it's fun. It's so unrealistic in this joyless, painful nightmare existence we share. Thank Christ for companies like Epic for games like Gears of War that popularised fat space marines trundling between chest-high walls like they're in wheelchairs. But in 2004, a company called People Can Fly shirked modern trends to create Painkiller, a fast, frantic, and shamingly fun evocation of the bygone age, and one of my favourite shooters of all time. Wow, said Epic. You really showed us how it's done, People Can Fly. Why don't you...
Pero solo damos el primer Painkiller y el Black Ops de Hell. Después los otros Painkillers son literalmente Call of Duty, pero solo que sin ser descarado, porque ellos sí admiten que han copiado la misma fórmula en 30 condenados juegos. Exceptuando el nuevo que salió ahora para PlayStation 5, que es irónico, se siente como un Doom, pero un Doom cooperativo bastante raro, más si se tiene que analizar la historia de algunos personajes Historia que no las has visto todas, obviamente, porque es un cooperativo, pero estaría interesado de ver cómo seguía la historia de algunos personajes, cómo llegaron al purgatorio y cómo se enfrentarían al mismísimo Belzebú.
Step over here for a second. Come on, don't be shy. We're not going to hurt you. Now, drop the net. Hit them with sticks. Phew, nipped that one in the bud. So now that people can fly up in roundly whipped into line, they and Epic Games can bring you Bulletstorm, a game about fat space marines. A small ship full of the chunky bastards are out seeking revenge on the military leader who betrayed them and...
La razón por qué la jugué está Duke Nukem. No, no miento. Hay un DLC de Duke Nukem. Duke Nukem puede participar en Bulletstorm.
Succeed in downing both him and themselves onto some future equivalent of Butlins that's been taken over by marauding gangs and mutants, and the challenge when analysing the story of Bulletstorm is figuring out just how many litres of piss it's taking. At times, the Central Space Marines are strongly reminiscent of the Republican Space Rangers from GTA 4, all overtly bursting with homoerotic tension and employing the word dick at every opportunity in a rather Freudian way, and the token matchstick thin and probably strong skimpy vest wearing female character who lactates a steady stream of penis envy is probably meant to be a joke, or at least I fucking hope so, but at other times the protagonist's unresolved guilt for the misfortunes of the men under his command is played oddly straight. It makes me wonder how deep the irony hole really goes, and how many of the people involved in development were in on the joke. Bulletstorm is best summarised as the spirit of classic psychotic fun shooters pushed through the filter of modern-style action gaming, which is like forcing a quick and sprightly fox to queue up with the sleep.
Siento más, honestamente, yo lo jugué hace años, como dije, con el DLC de Duke Nukem. El verdadero Duke Nukem Forever, no el Duke Nukem Forever que todos conocemos. Y yo lo considero más como un shooter parodia en sí. ¿Por qué me refiero a shooter parodia? Porque tiene muchos momentos más cómicos que momentos serios de un shooter. Y los momentos muy exagerados emocionales, con un personaje incluso haciéndose de badass. Como por ejemplo la vez que entras a un bar y literalmente creo que te dan un logro por beber todas las cervezas que tiene el bar. O por el tema de que como más o menos resuelves unos puzzles o unas cosas allí para que tu compañero te dé las ideas y eso y demás. Es algo bastante gracioso, la verdad. Lo siento más una parodia o como un juego estilo parodia, por decirlo así, los shooters en sí. Podría decirlo que es una parodia del mismo Call of Duty si quisiera, pero como dije, está Duke Nukem, así que puedo decir que es como un shooter parodiando a Duke Nukem Forever si fuera verdaderamente bueno.
Badgers. So gameplay is a linear series of battlegrounds inspired by the architectural school of Sir Wally McChesthigh, and health regenerates if you suck your thumb behind a tree for a few seconds, but the game creates an air of forced jollity with a lengthy library of fun novelty kills that you can execute to get points for buying guns and ammo. It's rather awkwardly tire-ironed into the plot. You're using a stolen military thing that resupplies soldiers based on their performance in the field, which doesn't explain why it gives you points for killing insects, blowing up advertising robots, and getting drunk, unless the military organization was sponsored by Bacardi. It's not a complaint, but I do wonder why it feels the need to explain it, and I wonder if that isn't part of the problem, that we can't just cock around without feeling the need to give our cocks backstories. If you cast your mind back to the middle portion of the last sentence, you'll note my...
Ok, he vuelto, chicos, justo la chamba, así que... A ver, creo que está un poco fuerte mi voz, igual después me lo dicen. Ya seguimos.
Use of the phrase part of the problem, and a problem there certainly is. It stems from the game being torn like a flighty broad in a romance novel between the penniless but exciting motorbike riding Painkiller and the dull suit-wearing accountant with guaranteed income Gears of War. Like Painkiller, the weapons have all been rather gratifyingly designed to be basically viscerally fun to use. The shotgun sounds like God slamming his car door and is powerful enough to separate a fellow from his entire joy department. Sniper rifle bullets can be carefully guided in slow-mo bulleto vision directly into an enemy's taint, then exploded. There's a gun that basically attaches remotely detonated suicide bomber vests to people, and you're armed with a lasso and a mighty boot to hurl enemies around the battlefield, into spikes, onto fires, and off cliffs. If you can convince yourself that the basic human enemies all resemble your co-workers, in-laws, and probation officers, then you have everything you need to stave off your workplace shooting rampage for another few grim, tortuous days. But the problem with Bulletstorm's spree killer activity playset is that it seems to have been designed for a different game, one more in line with the fast gameplay shooters had before they ate all the pies. The effectiveness of many of the weapon-specific special attacks rely on enemies being grouped closely together, but they never do that. They spread out and hide them on cover the moment they arrive on the scene. In Painkiller, I would have circle-strafed around to wrangle them together like a heavily armed border collie, but as with every bloody-mindedly realistic shooter, stepping out from cover just results in getting handfuls of strawberry jam smeared all over your eyes. There's one weapon that drops a bouncing bomb that explodes each time it lands, and you're supposed to run up and kick it at people, but how your lumbering thunder thighs are supposed to achieve that without a drastic sinus clearing is beyond me. There are some melee enemies that run towards you out of cover, and if you're lucky, they'll form up into a nice convenient queue so that they can all be tidily relieved at their top halves, but some spunk chump thought it would be a great idea to have to press the right shoulder button to activate the special attack, then right trigger to fire it. I cannot for the life of me think of a good reason why he couldn't just fire it by pressing the right shoulder button, because it adds another second or two of thinking time, and that's exactly what you don't have when axe-wielding wazzocks are running up with designs on your man salad. Bulletstorm does make the effort to be cathartic. A couple of the dialogue lines make me laugh, and the environments look nice, or rather the skyboxes look nice, while the actual environments you play in are just chest-high clutter. It is, at the end of the day, fun to kick your ex's new boyfriend into exposed wiring, but I don't think it's all on the same page. It's trying to have its cake and eat it, which might explain why all the Space Marines got so fat. A concept for a good, fast-paced, run-aroundy, chaotic shooter lies in here somewhere, tantalizing me from beneath the infuriating chains and straitjackets of compromise with today's AAA conveyor belt system. Perhaps I over-idealize the old ways over the Space Marine Angst Brigade, but all I can say is I don't remember ever asking for this. I don't remember playing Doom and thinking this game would be perfect if only I was wearing a fucking dustbin. Pardon me for being detestably predictable, but I'm now going to complain about how all the bad guys in Killzone are British, because someone...
Así que saltándomelo, lo siento, pero nunca ha habido un Killzone para PC, sadly. Ok, creo que vamos a reaccionar a un video o dos videos más, y creo que ahí después veremos con quién los mando, chicos, para terminar el stream. Así que, a ver, uno más, a ver si es que habré jugado. El pollo, nunca he jugado al pollo. Fue argentino y sin consola. Así que no puedo decir nada del pollo. Hay tantos juegos de Nintendo que no puedo jugar. Dragon Age.
Because let's face it, there's no surer method for turning him into a girl, and fat. And being a fat, girly lad on any schoolyard in the world is like offering people a coconut if they can beam you right between the eyes with a rock. The opinions I've been hearing on Dragon Age 2 have been like the Burger King Kids Club, rather absurdly mixed. I've bent an ear to many who call it a vastly improved epic, perfectly spiced with all the gay sex that got cut out of Mass Effect 2, and an equal number who call it a rushed-out cash-in with more loading time than a truck full of giant sea turtles. But even before we begin, I can tell you this. There are two kinds of games in this putrid world of ours, those that are made mainly because the developers thought it would be a lovely thing for everyone to play, and those that are made mainly because the developers thought it would be lovely to add another ballroom to their golden money palace, and Dragon Age 2 is almost certainly in the second camp. How do I know? Because it's called Dragon Age 2. Original thought was apparently at such a premium that they couldn't even think of a subtitle. I can think of a few. Dragon Age Intermission, Dragon Age Loading, or perhaps just Dragon Age Blur. Actually, this is harder than I thought, because before a subtitle can be thought up, we need to determine exactly what Dragon Age 2 is about. Much like the first one, it's all about the representative messages and can't go 5 minutes without someone being really heavy-handedly racist against mages, elves, dwarves, goldfish, etc., which is why I find it somewhat ironic that you're only allowed to play as a human this time around, when the first game let you pick from an entire Burger King Kids Club of races and backstories. Here you're always a human with the surname Hawk, so to compensate for the lack of choice, other characters can actually address you by name. Whoop-de-fucking-do. And I'd just like to point out...
Y no sé por qué es eso. Porque eso es algo que yo hablé en el stream que salió para el carajo cuando traté de streamear Dragon Age y después descubrí que era porque bendito Gigabet ahora no funciona a la noche porque quién sabe qué tiene esa compañía malvada de provisoria de internet. De que en el Dragon Age 1 puedes elegir más de una raza. Algo parecido a lo que más adelante vendría con Skyrim. Podías elegir ser un enano, podías elegir un elfo, podías incluso elegir una historia diferente para los inicios de un elfo, un enano o incluso un humano. No sé por qué en el 2 sacaron eso y decidieron, espera un momento, este juego va a tratar de racismo. Este juego, el 2, va a tratar de racismo a los magos, enanos y demás. ¿Y qué criatura más racista que el ser humano? Eso tiene lógica. Y pues, el ser humano, personaje principal, no puedes probar con un enano racista, con un elfo racista, lo cual es irónico si sabemos cómo es la historia de Skyrim con los elfos altos. Y ni siquiera hablemos de los nórdicos. Oh, Dios mío, cuando hablemos de los nórdicos cuando toque Skyrim, creo que Twitch me baneará tantas veces escuchando las palabras nórdico y racista muchas veces.
That this is quite a long game, so being a male character with the first name Ethan is going to stop being funny very fast. During the events of the first game, Hawke and his or her family are driven out of their homeland to a city across the sea, a place with such a huge intolerance for immigrant refugees that you will spend your entire existence there being set upon by gangs of identical dudes every 30 fucking seconds. But this is just the setup. Who's the villain? What's the overarching threat? Wherefore begins the grand adventure? What, in a nutshell, is Dragon Age 2 about? Well, it's about seeing how long you can stretch a game with a total of about 7 rooms. With nothing so harrowing as an engine change on the cards, every character is still assembled from the rather lacking Dragon Age 1 asset pool, including the shiny haircuts made from varnished wood, and the universally identical bodies that leave Hawke's elderly mother with the same massive curvaceous bosoms as a table dancer, Freud. What is new is that several cues have been taken from Mass Effect, and not just the fixed surname mono-species protagonist of unrecorded gender and profession. The conversation system now uses a radial Mass-Ecti interface, with every choice being between the nice response, the nasty response, and the open quotes witty response that never fails to make me want to cave in Hawke's smug fucking face with a book of after-dinner speeches. Also, the whole game favours a Mass Effect hub-based mission system over Dragon Age 1's adventure from place-to-place model, never actually leaving the one city. Now, you could say this was a stylistic choice rather than a cynical attempt to do as little work as possible, but so many questing environments are reused without a single alteration, you'd think the dungeons started opening franchises.
Demasiado. Literal, hay muchos niveles que se reducen demasiadas veces. Pasas solo una vez en esa ciudad y ya vivirás en esa ciudad más tiempo de lo que tú crees.
There's also been a bit of a tweaking in the combat, and when I say tweaking, I mean in the crystal meth sense. The idea that your character targets whichever enemy they happen to be looking at would be really intuitive if we were fighting in a fucking narrow corridor, so any intention you might have to play with a skillful strategy will swiftly descend into wading in and mashing attack like there's a really fat spider on the end of your sword. The fights seem so token and unreal, like they needed to throw in 50% more combat at the last minute to appease the violent shithead marketing board. It doesn't seem to matter where you are. Every 50 paces another group of murderers with some contrived grievance teleport in and fight you to the death. You could be strolling through the park on a summer's day and get savaged by a bunch of art students upset that you walked in on their life drawing class. And they always spawn in a few more when you think you're done, like the game revels in the awkwardness of its controls. Hey, Dragon Age 2, I can't even see who I'm fighting because the camera doesn't have the courtesy to look where I'm looking. We know. That's why we just spawned 10 guys directly behind you and now they've killed all your mages. Ha ha hardy. Ha ha. Mind you, my mages died less often after I'd gone through all their tactical menus and added the request that they drink a potion if they fall below 10% health, because otherwise potions are like after 8 minutes and everyone's too polite to take one. Commanding your allies on the fly is as big a nightmare as ever, especially if Hawke dies and suddenly you have to control someone directly with a completely different array of skills, so it's like your nice familiar hatchback has spontaneously transformed into a submarine.
Eso es algo que también pasaba en el 1. Cuando tú morías o uno de los personajes moría, podías controlar a otro personaje mientras tanto.
Hard to dislike them though, because the extensive dialogues between party members is one of the few areas that haven't been skimmed on. For the record, I ended up hooking up with the gay mage fellow, and everyone else spent the rest of the game subtly asking him about the size of my turgid warrior cock. This was the only relationship that made sense to me. My version of Hawke had a floppy hairdo and a self-deprecating Hugh Granty sort of face and tended to favour the glib remarks, so my interpretation of the character was that he took it up the arse like a champ. But where Dragon Age 2 falls hardest for me is that I'd almost say it doesn't have a plot at all. I don't get an overall sense of what I'm supposed to be working towards. At first you're questing to raise money for a treasure hunting expedition which has unexpected bad shit will go down written all over it in Christmas lights, but then it gets pulled off without a hitch and you return to the city and live rich and comfortable for several years. There's still 2/3 of the game to go. Then you're called in to deal with an uprising, which was sort of hinted at in the previous section, so you start to think maybe this is the overarching story. But then that'll get sorted out and the time skips ahead another few years before the remaining third of the game. The only point anything resembling a world-threatening fantasy adventure story occurs is right at the end for the sequel hook. It's a holding pattern, that's what it is. It's someone being kicked out onto the stage to nervously tell stalling anecdotes while they desperately put the play together. Not so much a hero's journey, so much as a hero piddles around for a while, gobbing off his handsome friend. I have viewers who genuinely believe that the only reason I've never done a video on the specific population particular games or franchises that they like is because they're my secret guilty pleasure, as if I'm afraid a positive opinion on a game emerging from my lips will take all my integrity with it like a stream of colourful handkerchiefs. So having never covered Pokemon before, the appearance of another few greasy pustules on its amorphous mass presents a great opportunity to disabuse the shit out of some notions. Now, I did religiously watch the TV show when I was younger.
Como dije, nunca he jugado Pokémon. Tendría que probar en un futuro algún Pokémon, la verdad. Estoy pensando tal vez cuando termine Doom, jugarme la saga Pokémon. No digo en joda, todos los Pokémon, inclusive los Pokémon de la GBA o de la 3DS. Aunque muchos amigos me recomendaron más la versión de 3DS, por más historia y más cantidad de Pokémon. Tengo que ver cuáles, neta. Pero sí, tendría que volver, bueno, miento. Nunca jugué un Pokémon, así que tendría que al menos intentar jugar en un Pokémon. Los recientes terremotos y tsunami en Japón fueron una tragedia. Yathzeee ofrece su simpatía para un país y gente que ha tenido una admiración y respeto. Esto es para dar karmáticamente un balance a su siguiente línea chistosa. Ok, ¿cuál va a ser?
Boy, the Japanese are into some weird shit, aren't they? Comes a point where acknowledging cultural difference doesn't cut it anymore, and you have to say, what the fuck, guys? Generally the point when tentacle monsters molest 15-year-olds on subway trains. It makes reviewing a game like Yakuza 4 extremely difficult because virtually all my negative points can be countered with the argument, well, that's what they like in
jugar para money.
Japan. Now, this counter-argument can itself be countered by going through the list of some other things that people have been known to like in Japan, which I won't read out in full because I'd have to brush my teeth afterwards. The thrust of that rather weak opening is that it'd be difficult to think of a way Yakuza could make itself more Japanese. It's set in a faithfully accurate depiction of modern Tokyo, and the only language option is Japanese with English subtitles, so I hope you like having to exclusively watch the bottom 2 inches of the screen throughout all the drama. The amount of modern Japanese culture that gets worked in makes you wonder if it's not actually aimed at foreign tourists. The equivalent would be a British game in which you play a Bobby in old London town, healing up by eating fish and chips, and using a fighting style that mainly employs rugby tackles. Anyway, throughout the course of the plot, you play as 4 individuals with interconnecting storylines and universally inexplicable kung fu skills. Akiyama, a suave moneylender who resembles Alan Wake crossed with Leisure Suit Larry. Saejima, a prison escapee with a face like the San Andreas Fault. Tanemura, a 14-year-old boy who has somehow joined the police force. And Kazuma Kiryu, previous Yakuza games protagonist who's absent for just long enough to make you think the series has moved on, but is smashing faces with the best of them by the second act. You see, in the world of Yakuza 4 and the series as a whole, faces are the source of all evil, and the best way to drive the evil out of your enemies is to smash it out with both feet or the occasional handrail to the septum. The main characters all go for the face like it's the last drop of toothpaste in the tube. It's actually quite alarming the number of times you'll see a random street thug profusely apologising with his nose hanging around his chin. It might sound like I'm ragging on it, but I'm really not. I actually really like the fighting engine in these games. It's fast and skillful, and broken teeth fly across the screen like pulpy ladybirds in exactly the right way to give it a strong visceral appeal, and I defy you not to get enjoyment from smashing a bicycle over someone's head before beating his friend to death with one of the wheels. It does have a bad habit of making you fight groups in really tight spaces, but that just increases the concentration of faces, testicles and kneecaps that go together to form a sumptuous fruit basket for your fist. What I don't like about the combat is this. Gameplay should drive the car while the story navigates and picks the radio station, but Yakuza's story and gameplay are in different cars heading in different directions, and the story car is an overloaded lorry with one tyre missing. Yakuza 4 is a sandbox game in the very peculiarly Japanese style as seen in games like Shenmue and Deadly Premonition. There's a main plot and then there's a whole bunch of unconnected bullshit that makes the main plot seem a lot less urgent. And it's not the kind of sandbox where you can start curb-checking passers-by if you get bored. Here, combat may only take place within the designated area. There are combat random encounters that take an almost Final Fantasy approach by teleporting you and your future shoe ornaments into a small pocket dimension presided over by the gods of reconstructive dentistry. And it doesn't flow well for me. Some of the grievances the random encounters come up with to justify the fights get pretty ridiculous too. Tokyo apparently has a population with such low self-esteem that having a confident walk is grounds for burly men to beat you to death, and crowds will gather and cheer them along because you deserve it, walking around all smug and emotionally balanced. Now, while side quests are always nice, Yakuza 4s are a little hard to find. Yes, I like exploration. I even like how they don't mark side quest objectives on your map, so you have to...
No piensa volver a sufrir con lo que sufrí con Yakuza 0 y Yakuza Kiwami. No piense que voy a hacer toda la secundaria. Me vale bledo si aún voy a pelear con el todopoderoso Oni. Creo que era Omi, algo así. No voy a volver a pelear con ese cabrón. No me importa si aún con 4. No voy a hacerlo. No voy a hacer complexionismo de
Cool.
Yakuza nunca más en la vida.
On your Boy Scout orienteering skills, but I think there has to be something wrong with a game where I can plow through the whole story and never even notice half the content. And even if I did, I usually saw no benefit or just plain didn't want to do it. A lot of side quests just eventually get resolved by someone getting up in your grill and you wearing their mandible as a winkle picker, but then there are the mini games. Most perplexing of all is Akiyama's side business, in which he runs a hostess club. This is another Japanese cultural thing in which I don't see the appeal, because it's basically paying to sit and get blue-balled for an hour, and has to take an individual girl under his wing, choosing her dresses, makeup and training options to make her into the best little not whore in the not brothel. And if this had been the only gameplay mechanic in a Japanese game, I would have expected to be sticking things up the girls' buttholes by the end of the week. As it stands, it's a bizarrely out-of-place pretty princess dress-up mode, going on 10 feet away from two-fisted face ruining. I don't know what the eventual rewards are, but they can't be important because I got through the whole story campaign without too much difficulty. If last week's Pokemon review didn't make this clear enough, I'm a man who's never been bothered by 100% completion, especially when most of it's unrelated to the plot. I don't see why everything needs to be my responsibility. If every passerby needs a kindly stranger to bring them their packed lunch, then perhaps it would be better to leave them to Darwin. But to conclude on the story, that takes a bit of a Final Fantasy approach too. Cutscenes run on like the hot water in an Alaskan bathhouse. Nothing is said once that can be said 7 times. It's frustrating because unlike Final Fantasy, I actually like some of the characters, but they make it pretty hard for me with all the time they spend pausing for effects or making reaction noises. Nandi. You could stitch them all together and make a pretty funky remix. And the plot as a whole isn't stellar. From a relatively stable starting position, the story goes 8 ways bananas by the end. Everyone who isn't dead betrays each other about 17 times a piece, and the game ends with every single one of them having a big shirtless fist fight on the roof of a tall building like an argument broke out at the homosexual male models base jumpers club. And to my dismay, nobody says, "Blimey, it's windy up here. Do you mind if I put my shirt back on because my nipples have turned into little rosy jelly beans?" You know, if I lived in New York City, I'd be a little bit weirded out by the mainstream media, because every other disaster movie, alien invasion movie and romantic comedy would feature proxy representations of me and all my friends getting murdered and having all our possessions burned. It's the sort of thing that might give a chap a complex, isn't it? You might look at audiences flocking to watch the Statue of Liberty retain its title as landmark most frequently dismembered on screen and think, you people are looking forward to this, aren't you? This was tested when 9/11 happened, and for a while everyone was really sensitive and airbrushing the World Trade Center out of things like a pair of inconvenient erections in a Calvin Klein photo shoot. But then someone said, you can't deny it made good television, and then made Cloverfield. I mean, you wouldn't make a film this year about aliens causing an earthquake in Japan. What is it about New York City? Is it payback for West Side Story? So Crisis 2 says, hey, we'll have aliens ruin...
Ya me parecía raro, ya decía, ¿qué tenía que ver Cloverfield? Ya, Crisis. Ok chicos, así que para el próximo domingo, si es que esta vez no hay tanto ruido y eso, probamos con escuchar los restos de Crazy 2. Pero ya han pasado sus bonitas... ¿Cuánto llevamos? 2 horas y media. Sí, ya, llevamos 2 horas, literalmente 2 horas y media. Wow. Así que para terminar el stream, vamos a ver... Ah, no, 2 horas y 10. Ok, 2 horas y 10, estaba hablando además. Así que para finalizar este bonito stream, vamos a ver quién está online hoy. ¿Quién los puedo mandar en este bonito horario? Vamos a ver. A ver, ¿con quién los mando? A ver. Mades, Urban, Tetris. Brookverso. ¿Hace cuánto no escucho al muchacho? Steam Random haciendo sufrir a un amigo. Que grande el Brookie. Chavis Chat. Oh, Manny está en vivo. Ok. Terminando. Oh, ¿ya puedo solucionar lo de Silencio Hill? Oh, ok. A ver si puedo mandarles con Manny. Manny parece solucionó lo del Silencio Hill 1. Ok, los mando con Manny chicos, porque también tengo que hacer unas limpiezas aquí en la casa y eso, así que me alegro verlos, espero que esté todo bien, tengan una bonita semana. Nos vemos el lunes si hay tiempo para seguir todavía con el Doomcito. Esta ha sido Gimane63 y les dice que los quiero mucho y se cuiden. Cuídense.